Have you ever had a food that you tried at first and you didn't like it, but the more and more you tried it or you were exposed to it, the more you started to actually enjoy it or you liked the taste? In English, we call this an acquired taste. I'm sure you're really familiar with the concept. For this concept, I think of sushi because most people in the United States, Americans, we don't like sushi the first time we try it because we typically don't have a lot of raw fish or uncooked fish, and we're not even that much of rice eaters, and we definitely don't have a lot of dried seaweed. For me, when I tried sushi, I had to try it quite a few times before I really started to like it and enjoy it. So I had to acquire the taste or acquire the liking for sushi. You can use this phrase, an acquired taste, to talk about other things like clothes, music, movies, just things that take a long time to start to like. So you have to be exposed to something for many times to acquire the taste. The first phrase is a really common compliment that we tell people sometimes when one person has an idea and the other person has the exact same idea. And instead of just saying, oh, we have the same idea, we say, great minds think alike. So this means that we're thinking the same thing and you're kind of complimenting yourself if you say this, as well as the other person. Like, we are so smart, we have great minds, and we think the same.
Great minds think alike, Daddy.
Do you say this phrase in your first language, great minds think alike? Because it is so common to say to another person here in the United States when you guys have the same idea or you were thinking about doing the same thing at the same time. So sometimes in a more casual conversation, I'll say, what do you want for dinner? And the other person says, pizza. I'll think, I was going to say pizza too. Great minds think alike. Let's go get some pizza. So this is a really common, fun phrase that we use to compliment another person here in the United States.
An acquired taste.
An acquired taste.
This next phrase can be really funny to use. If you see someone and they are staring at someone they like, oftentimes in English we call that their crush. So if you see a girl and she really likes a boy, but she hasn't told them yet, she will have what we call googly eyes. So you could say, why are you making googly eyes at him? That just means you're looking at them in a really loving way. So this is a really informal phrase that just means you have an expression on your face that you're staring at someone because you probably really like them if you're giving them googly eyes. Another way we use this phrase, googly eyes, is just to explain how a cartoon looks when they have just funny eyes. We call them googly eyes. Try saying this phrase because it's super fun and funny to say googly eyes, googly eyes. In English, when you describe someone as having a good head on their shoulders, it means they make very responsible, very moral, and very good decisions.
You used to have a good head on your shoulder before Rodney got a hold of you.
Now, if you have children, you really hope that your children's friends have good heads on their shoulders. This is just the phrase or the idiom that we use to say, like, their friends are responsible and their friends aren't a negative influence on their life. When I was a kid, my friend's dad said, I'm really glad that you hang out with my daughter because you really have a good head on your shoulders. I was pretty responsible and I mostly made good decisions when I was younger, especially when I was a teenager. Now, on the contrary, if you have someone who does not have a good head on their shoulders, they are a bad influence, you can say, I want you to have nothing to do with them. So when we say we have nothing to do with them, it means we want no association. They are not a good person.
I want nothing to do with any of you.
And we can use this phrase, I want nothing to do with them. I want nothing to do with him, her. I want nothing to do with it, or you could even say, I want nothing to do with that. It just means you want no association in general. The other day, my friend and I were going to go meet at a restaurant, and we left at the same time in 2 separate cars. And I called them and I said, hey, I'm right on your tail. That means I was following them because I didn't know how to get to the restaurant, so I was directly behind them. That English phrase, to be right on someone's tail, means you're directly behind them Or if you're chasing someone, you might use this expression to say you almost caught up to them. I'm right on your tail. White as a ghost. Now, a ghost is obviously typically portrayed as the color white, especially in movies and television shows. And a very common way to say that somebody's skin has gone very pale, either because they are very frightened or about to be sick, is we say they were white as a ghost. Maybe you've seen television shows or movies where a woman tells a man that she is unexpectedly pregnant, and the man will turn white as a ghost. He'll look very surprised, and the color will go out of his face, so he'll look very white. So in English, we use the expression white as a ghost when someone is, unexpected of something and they're very surprised. Or sometimes if someone is getting sick, or about to vomit or throw up, we say they turn white as a ghost before.
I come out looking white as a ghost.
So you wouldn't know that because you're white as a ghost.
Speaking of the color white, I hope that you do not tell any white lies. In English, we use the phrase white lie to refer to a very small, very minor lie that we tell. And usually when we tell a white lie, it's because we don't want to say the truth and offend someone or hurt someone's feelings. So an example of a white lie would be if your friend says, hey, do you want to go out to dinner with me tonight? And you say, actually, I have a lot of work to do at home. I can't go out tonight. Now, the white lie here might be that you don't actually have any work to do, but you just want to relax and you don't want to go out that night, but you don't want your friend's feelings to be hurt. You don't want them to think that you don't like them. So you're just saying, oh, I'm so busy, I can't go out. That's just a small lie. It's not a major one, but it's a white lie. Some people believe that it is bad even to tell a white lie, and some people think that white lies are okay because they can save you some stress of offending someone or telling someone something that's just too honest.
It's only a white lie.
Even a little white lie.
These are called little white lies.
Little white lies?
Have you ever heard of someone with a white-collar job? In English, when someone has a job where they don't work with their hands and they definitely don't get dirty in their job, they do more of office work, we call that a white-collar job. We also use the phrase in English, white-collar crime. This is a crime that has not hurt anyone. It's not violent of any sort. It's more of a financial crime. So maybe you have stolen some money somehow, or you have cheated the system in a way with money. We refer to those as white-collar crimes. So anything that relates to white collar in English just means a professional job that works in an office setting or in a corporate or financial setting rather than working with their hands. Many people go to college so that they can get a white-collar job.
White collar, college grad.
White collar, blue collar.
White collar crime.
This next phrase, it can be applied in a lot of different ways. If you take a verb, you add ed as the suffix, and then you say out, like we could say, I'm hiked out. If you've gone hiking all day, you can say, I'm hiked out. That means you don't want to hike anymore because you've done that action so much. Or if you've studied and studied and studied and you don't want to study anymore, you could say, I'm studied out. So this just means that you've done something so much that you are completely exhausted and you don't want to do that action anymore. To tie someone over. So when we use this phrase to tie someone over, or often we say this will tie you over, this is an incredibly useful phrase. It means you're coming up with a temporary solution, so something that's going to fix a problem only for a little bit until you can find a long-term solution to their problem. So for instance, if somebody doesn't have any money, but they're going to get paid pretty soon, you could say, here's a couple of dollars to hold you over or to tie you over until your paycheck on Friday. So that means the few dollars should help, but they need to get paid on Friday to actually solve the problem. Or if someone's really hungry, but it's not dinner time yet, you could say, here is a quick snack to tie you over until dinner. So when they eat dinner, they won't be hungry anymore. But if you give them just a little snack before dinner, they'll not be hungry just for a little bit. Or if someone's really bored, you can say, hey, here's a book to tie you over until, you have something to do.
You tie a ponder over here.
I find this next phrase in English, especially over email, to be incredibly useful because it helps people do things that you want them to do for you. So recently I was emailing someone about getting a certain service and I wanted a really good price. And they said, sorry, we can only give you this price. I responded, could you work your magic and ask if you can get me a better price? So this just means I'm kind of complimenting the person, like what they do is magic to get me a better price. So in this way, using this phrase, I was being kind of manipulative. You don't always have to use this phrase in quite a manipulative way, but you can use it just to compliment someone on the work they do. Sometimes we use this phrase, just work your magic, to mean just get it done however you get it done. I totally trust you. So if you're asking someone, hey, could you help me with the cleaning over here? They could say, yeah, how do you want me to clean it? You could say, well, just work your magic. You know how to do it. So this just means just help me get it done. I don't care how you get it done.
Work your magic.
Work your magic.
Time to work your magic.
A really important phrase to know in English is a hard copy. What do we mean when we say, I need a hard copy of this? Maybe you've already heard this phrase, but you didn't know exactly what it means. Basically, when you ask someone for a hard copy of a document, you're asking for a printed version on actual paper. Nowadays, there are so many things that are sent digitally on the computer, but sometimes we actually need to see what we need to read on paper, or maybe we need to sign it or give it to someone else. So we ask for a hard copy or a printed copy on paper. One way that I use this phrase is sometimes I say, yeah, I actually read a hard copy of this book. This means that I didn't listen to it on an audiobook or I didn't just read it on my computer or my phone.
Your hard copy right there.
OLIN. Hard copy, please. I mean, I'm sure you printed out a copy. You have a hard copy, right?
This next English phrase is really useful, especially if you're starting a new job or you're going to a new university or school or you're learning a new language. The phrase is a crash course, and you probably would not be able to guess exactly what this means in English. So listen carefully. If you give someone a crash course on a subject, it means you teach them just the bare minimum about something really quickly, so that they can do the job, but they're not going to be able to do it well if you just gave them a crash course. For instance, long ago, I was a barista, which means I worked at a coffee shop. And on my first few days, I had just had a crash course on how to make all of the drinks on the menu. So I was making a lot of mistakes because I was not taught thoroughly how to make everything. And so a lot of people were getting their coffee incorrect that day. If you are going to go to a new country, maybe you don't speak the language, so you just get a quick crash course on the basics. You'll learn how to say hello, goodbye, please, thank you. Where's the bathroom? You're not getting actual lots of information. You're just getting a crash course, which means a brief overview or just the bare minimum.
I'm going to give you a crash course, okay?
Crash course in manipulation.
This next English word is really important because an English learner asked me about this question the other day. A student of mine asked me, what does it mean when someone says you look bloodshot? And actually, in English, we typically say your eyes look bloodshot. Bloodshot eyes are eyes that are pretty red for either the reason that the person is very tired, which is usually why I have bloodshot eyes, or if a person is intoxicated, they can have bloodshot eyes, or maybe there's just a medical problem that was the reason that they have bloodshot eyes. If you have an injury in your eye will look bloodshot or very red. And it can be quite scary if you have extremely bloodshot eyes. So now you know how to describe someone with very red eyes using the word bloodshot in English.
Bloodshot eyes. No.
Not the bloodshot in your eyes.
When you were a child, you probably raced your brother or your sister or your friend, and maybe they started the race before you. In English, we call this getting a head start. So when you were a child, having a race, you might have said, hey, that's no fair. You got a head start. That means you started first. So anytime someone starts a competition early, giving them an advantage, we call that giving them a head start. In the United States, there is a big government program that provides preschool services to young children because not everyone gets to go to preschool here. It's not as common as other countries. And it's typically given to children who are lower income, and we call it Head Start. So it's basically just trying to give these children early exposure to school and academics to give them a head start in school. So hopefully they'll be successful early on. So giving someone a head start can just mean trying to give them an advantage early on in a competition or a job or whatever it might be.
It's better to get a head start.
Okay, pal. You got a head start. Head start.
One phrase that I really, really like to use to be polite and just express my gratitude or my thankfulness for something that somebody does for me is I say, thank you for going to the trouble. So a lot of times when I visit my sweet grandmother, she will make me a meal. She'll make me breakfast, lunch, dinner, no matter what time of day it is. Even if I said, Grandma, you don't have to cook, she'll go to the trouble of cooking. So we just mean, going to the effort, using effort to do something for someone else. So I'll say to my grandma, you don't have to go to the trouble of making me food. Or I'll say, thank you for going to the trouble of making me food. So this is just a really common phrase we use in English when we're thanking someone or if we're just, explaining to someone that they don't have to do something because we think it's going to inconvenience them. So it's seen as a pretty polite phrase in English. Thanks for going to the trouble.
Why go to the trouble?
I don't want you to go to the trouble.
Have you ever told someone something and they seem to just not listen and do the complete opposite? Well, the good phrase that we have in English for this exact scenario is we say it went in one ear and out the other. So this is just a funny image of, telling someone something and it just goes through their head and it doesn't stay in their brain and they don't listen. So a lot of people with their husband or their wife, they'll tell them something, and when they feel like they're not listening to their advice or what they ask them to do, they'll say, well, I feel like that just went in one ear and out the other, meaning I just feel like you are not listening to me, which we usually use this phrase when we are very frustrated with someone in English. In one ear and out the other.
In one ear and out the other with you, isn't it, Marge?
In one ear and out the other.
Have you ever gone on your phone and said, I'm just going to watch a couple videos, maybe just for 1 or 2 minutes, and then you keep scrolling and scrolling, and one thing led to another, and then you've been scrolling for over an hour? Well, this English phrase, one thing led to another, it just means that even though you think you're just going to do one thing, it literally leads to you taking more time and doing things related to that one thing. Another example I can think of that's quite common with this phrase is when you say to yourself, I'm just going to quickly clean up. I'm not going to do too much here. And you start organizing and maybe you take out your old clothes and you start vacuuming. One thing leads to another. All of a sudden, you're cleaning your entire house. So this phrase just means that you intend to only do one thing or a small thing, and that leads to you doing a lot of different things. And we definitely use this phrase more often when we feel guilty about something. Like, for instance, you could say, I'm just going to have one cookie, and one thing led to another, and you eat the whole box. So you feel kind of guilty and you say, well, I just was going to have one, but it led to me eating the whole box.
One thing leads to another.
And one thing led to another.
This next phrase was actually one that was new to me recently. I actually learned this English phrase, but I was asking other people in my life and they were quite familiar with this English phrase. As an English learner, it would be useful to know the phrase from soup to nuts. So when you use this phrase, it just means that someone has done something thoroughly, or they've covered everything completely. For instance, you could say, my wedding planner had everything covered, had everything planned from soup to nuts. This just means from the beginning to the end. Or maybe you're a project manager on a construction site and you made sure that everything about the project has gotten done and it's gotten done really well. You could say, I have overseen the construction project from soup to nuts. This means just completely. I just think this is a funny phrase. And it's one that I learned recently, but I've found it to be quite useful now as well.
The complete plans, security system, soup to nuts.
Kick their butts from soup to nuts.
If you want to tell someone that you want to learn more about them, the most natural English phrase that you can use is to say, let's just get to know each other. Or if you want to let someone know that your intentions are just to become friends, maybe you're not trying to date them right away, is you can say, I just want to get to know you, or we should just get to know each other. This phrase is really useful in conversation because it just lets a person know right away that you're interested in getting to know them or learn about them rather than trying to date them, or you just feel like you want to tell them that you need more time to get to know them before you date them. Or before you do something serious like start a business. Like, we could be business partners, but let's just get to know each other a little bit better first. You could even use this phrase when you start a job with someone, oh, let's just get to know each other before we talk about business.
Get to know each other better?
People really seem to be getting to know each other.
This phrase, to go to town, it definitely doesn't mean exactly what you think it would mean. When American English speakers use this phrase, to go to town, it means that you are doing something with a lot of energy and just enthusiasm. So in some families, we celebrate Christmas, and the children usually sometimes take turns opening presents. So maybe the youngest child will open a present, and then the next youngest will open a present, and then the oldest will open a present. Everyone kind of watches each other politely and kindly. Now, this is different in other families. Some families, they'll just let their kids go to town on their presents. They'll say, okay, everyone open your presents, and they just rip all the paper, and there's no taking turns. There's no watching each other politely. They are going to town. So this phrase can be used in a ton of different ways. Let me give you a couple more examples. Maybe you are someone who really enjoys shopping or buying clothes. And if there is a sale at your favorite store, if you are just going to go spend a lot of money and buy a lot of things, you can use this expression. You can say, I'm just going to town when I go shopping today. This means you are not limiting yourself and you're buying a lot of things. Or if you see someone who really enjoys a certain type of food, you can say, wow, they're really going to town over there. That means they're eating a lot of the food. They're not restricting themselves, they're not trying to be polite eating. They're going to town. They're eating a lot. They're excited about it. So this is usually a positive phrase, and it just means we're not limiting ourselves and we're being really enthusiastic about what we're doing when we're going to town.
Go to town!
Then she can go to town.
You might have heard English speakers use this phrase, you name it, at the end of a list. So when we're listing things and we want to say, just everything in this category, we'll say this at the end. Let me give you an example. So maybe you ask someone, what kind of music do you like? And they say, I like everything. And you're like, what do you mean? They're like, I like rap. I like country music. I like pop music. You name it. I like it. This just means anything in this category you can think of and you name or say, I like it. And we can use this phrase just in a lot of different ways when we want to say just everything in this category. Maybe you ask someone, oh, I didn't know you knew how to cook. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I cook a lot. I cook pizza, I cook spaghetti, you name it. I know how to make it. This just means whatever you can think of, I can do it. And this phrase, you name it, is definitely used in a more casual way when we're listing things. You know, it can almost be just kind of joking sometimes, like, yeah, you name it, of course. You know, you're saying just everything, even though, of course, if you say you're really good at cooking and you say you name it, you're probably not going to be able to cook everything in the world, but it's just a way of saying, you know, it's an exhaustive, long list of things.
You name it.
You name it. Really?
Speaking of food, this next idiom, to my liking, is also one that's very related to food. If you say, you know, this is too sweet for my liking, when we use this phrase for my liking, it just means to my personal taste. You can also hear English speakers say for my liking a lot as well. There is really no technical correct preposition that's supposed to be used here. You know, this is too sweet to my liking, or this is too sweet for my liking. It just means for my personal taste. When you are watching American English movies, you will definitely hear this phrase at some point. The coast is clear. This phrase, the coast is clear, even though the coast in English means the place where the water meets the land, you can use this phrase anywhere just to mean that there is no danger or obstacles present. And it doesn't have to be literal danger. It can just be, you know, you're kind of sneaking around. For instance, maybe you want to leave your work early, but you think your boss is going to see. You might say to your coworker, do you think the boss is around? Do you think he's looking right now? They might say, no, I think the coast is clear. Go ahead and sneak out of work. So this just means, you know, everything's clear. There's no obstacles or danger. Go ahead.
Coast is clear.
Oh, is the coast clear? What are you wearing?
If you use the phrase in English, we're in the same boat, it doesn't have to do anything with actually being in a location, but it just means you have the same problem. For instance, one time at work, I wasn't getting the emails from my boss at work, and neither was my coworker. And I said, why am I not getting their emails? And my coworker said, I don't know, I'm in the same boat as you. This just means we have the exact same problem. So oftentimes we use this phrase, we're in the same boat, to mean we have the same challenge or the same difficult situation. And it can be really comforting to someone when you say, yeah, I'm in the same boat, when you want to just relate to them and say you have the same problem or issue.
I'm in the same boat.
But we're all in the same boat. Teamwork.
If you want to say that you no longer have any problems, or, you know, you had a challenging situation and now the situation is over, we use the phrase in English, we are out of the woods. If there is a storm in your area, in the United States, there's a lot of tornadoes. And, you know, after the tornado or the storm passes, you want to say you're safe. You could say, I think we're out of the woods now. This just means the storm is over. I think we're safe. We can come out of our houses.
We're out of the woods.
Moist is out of the woods.
Have you ever heard the English phrase that something is a blessing in disguise? This concept of a blessing in disguise is really common amongst many cultures and languages, but let me give you an example just so you know how to use the phrase in English. If you maybe were not able to go to a friend's party because, you know, you're busy or something like that, and you were kind of sad at first, you thought it was a bad thing, but then you'll say, well, actually, I ended up being sick that night, and it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I didn't go to the party because I probably would have gotten you all sick. So even though it's a negative situation, you know, it is good that you didn't spread your illness or your sickness to other people. And the fact that you didn't go to the party was sad at first, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because you didn't get other people sick. So we use this phrase just to turn something that we thought was negative into a positive, or we're saying it actually turned out to be a positive or a blessing, a good thing in disguise.
Hey, blessing in disguise.
This is a blessing in disguise.
Have you ever bought something that broke the bank? This English phrase, to break the bank, it just means that something is really expensive, and oftentimes it's unexpectedly expensive. For instance, recently I paid someone to professionally clean my carpets, and it really kind of broke the bank. I was surprised at how expensive it was for these services to get your carpets cleaned properly. I'm glad I did it, but it did kind of break the bank a little bit. This phrase, the whole 9 yards, it's a really interesting English phrase because, first of all, the United States is one of the only places in the world that uses yard as a measurement, which is equal to 3 feet, which, of course, no one else uses feet. Sorry about that. But this phrase, the whole 9 yards, it means you use every resource up completely. I tried to look up where this phrase, the whole 9 yards, comes from because it's quite common in everyday English language. And there's 3 theories of where this phrase actually comes from, but nobody knows for sure. Some people thought it had to do with the amount of ammunition that soldiers in World War II would carry, 9 yards. Some people think it's because cement mixers used to hold 9 cubic yards of cement. And some people thought it was because when a tailor makes a suit, they need 9 yards of fabric. So nobody actually knows. But when we use this phrase, the whole 9 yards, it just means we need everything or we do everything. So for instance, you could say, yeah, she had a wedding and she had a photographer, a videographer, a DJ, food, whatever, the whole 9 yards. This just means they did everything possible for their wedding. Or maybe you want to say that your company provides a lot of good benefits. So you could say, yeah, my company provides health insurance, paid time off, maternity leave, the whole 9 yards. This just means everything. They give us everything. So this is generally a positive phrase to use, the whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards. Ski mask, flashlight, the whole 9 yards.
When you want to say that something is really, really new and very advanced technology, you can say it is the cutting edge. When I was quite young, we thought that iPods were the cutting edge of technology because now, we could just carry around a small device to play, all of our music that we owned. Now, that is not the cutting edge of technology anymore because the cutting edge of technology is to carry around your smartphone, which connects to the internet, and you can stream any song that's ever been made before. And that is the cutting edge of technology. So when we say that something is the cutting edge, and often we say the cutting edge of technology, we just mean it's the newest thing and it's the most innovative and advanced thing. Some people say that AI is the cutting edge of language learning, or AI is the cutting edge of just fill in the blank there, anything. That's a really common way that this phrase is used today.
Cutting edge technology.
It's pretty cutting edge, huh?
When you want to say that something is new, refreshing, and a positive change, in English, you can use the phrase a breath of fresh air. This is a really positive thing to say about someone when, they come into a role that they weren't in before. So for instance, maybe you see someone at your job and they just got hired, and the last person that worked in that role was maybe negative or you didn't like them. You could say to the person, you are such a breath of fresh air. This just means like you're a very positive change. Maybe in your house, you got new furniture and maybe some new artwork, and you could say it's just kind of a breath of fresh air for our house. This just means it's a positive change that makes you feel good in contrast to the old furniture and artwork.
Pat, you are such a breath of fresh air.
He's a breath of fresh air.
Have you ever heard an English speaker say they want a piece of the action? This phrase is really popular in business deals, and it's often used a lot in movies and television shows, just to mean that you want to be involved in the investment or the business deal in some way. So maybe you have 2 friends and they are starting a restaurant, and you think that you could be involved in the restaurant as well. You might say, hey, can I get a piece of the action here? This also means that you think their restaurant is going to be a profitable venture and you want to join them. So you hear this a lot in television shows and movies. And once in a while in everyday life, English speakers will use this phrase as well.
And some of us wanted a piece of the action.
Want a piece of the action?
If two of your friends are having an argument, a good way to say, like, you guys should stop your argument and get along, say you're sorry, maybe just stop worrying about what you disagree about. You can say, why don't you guys just bury the hatchet? In English, this means just end the argument and try to get along. You'll hear people say this phrase when they just want to get along with someone that they had a lot of problems with in the past. You could say, we finally buried the hatchet, we got along, and we don't argue about this thing anymore. So this phrase means the exact same thing as let's make peace.
To burying the hatchet.
We must talk to Kang. Bury the hatchet.
When English speakers see something that costs a lot of money, we might use this phrase, that costs a pretty penny. So if you see someone wearing a nice watch or a nice handbag or some nice shoes that you think are quite expensive, you could say, if you're comfortable saying this to the person, wow, that must have cost a pretty penny. That means it must have been very expensive and cost a lot of money for the person. So be careful how you use this phrase, but now you know the meaning of what it means to say that something costs a pretty penny.
Because it cost a pretty penny.
Oh, what do you know? That's going to cost me a pretty penny.
A really interesting thing about this next English phrase is that I hear it said two different ways, and I went to Youglish to confirm that the way that I say it is a little less common than the other way. So the way that I say this phrase is I say something is cut and dry. Now, I notice that some American speakers say cut and dry, but a lot more say cut and dried, and a lot of British English speakers will say cut and dried. There's no difference in what we're trying to say here, but for some reason that word dry and dried just gets changed sometimes. I think according to the dictionary, it's supposed to be dried, but you might hear it say dry. What this phrase means is something is straightforward and predictable. I think of the sport of MMA, mixed martial arts, so like the UFC, Conor McGregor. It's not a cut and dry sport. Sometimes if there is not a knockout or an ending to the fight, it goes all the rounds. The judges don't always have a cut and dry decision of who was the winner, who was better. So that is an example of something that is not so straightforward or cut and dry. But in some sports, things are very cut and dry. For instance, soccer, at the end of the game, whoever has scored more goals is the winner. The rules are very cut and dry. If you touch the ball with your hand, it's a handball and the other team gets a kick. So if you say that something is cut and dry, like the rules to a sport or just anything in general just has rules that cannot be changed, you are saying that the rules are not subjective. They can't be changed at all.
Cut and dried.
Pretty cut and dry.
The other day, my friend said to me, hey, do you have plans for tomorrow? And I said, well, I was planning on going to this big event, but I have nothing set in stone. This phrase, set in stone, just means official. So I think of this phrase as being like you're building a statue of something official. If you say that something is not official, you'll say it's not a statue yet. It's not set in stone. So this phrase is just a really casual and extremely common way that American English speakers say that something is not official yet. It can be changed. Now, you can use this phrase in the opposite way as well. If you want to say that something cannot change, you could say, well, yeah, my plans are kind of set in stone for tomorrow. That means they are official. I typically hear this phrase used more often to say something is not official, not set in stone, but it can be used in the other way as well.
Because nothing's set in stone.
Nothing's set in stone.
If you have a big plan to go to a wedding or an event or a date, whatever it is, you have your day all planned out, but on the way, your car breaks down and you're not able to get there anymore. You could say that your plan went up in smoke. This phrase is used really often when we want to say that a plan or some kind of work we're doing is completely ruined and we just can't do it anymore. Our plan went up in smoke. This means that what we plan to do can't happen anymore because something went so wrong that it ruined the plan.
All your dreams can go up in smoke.
And watching the world go up in smoke.
Have you ever met someone and they will argue with you and they'll start to say statistics that feel like they were just made up out of thin air? This phrase, to make something up out of thin air, it's used to emphasize that someone is just making something up with no factual basis. Like they're just coming up with it out of their head. It's kind of like saying they're lying, but they're trying to make something up usually to win an argument or a debate. They're making something up out of thin air with no evidence.
For the record, I pulled it out of thin air.
Pulls these so-called visions out of thin air.
Have you ever heard someone say they got a weight off their chest? This phrase in English, it means that someone, confesses a burden or they confess something that they did wrong to another person. And after telling the truth, they feel like lighter. They feel emotionally lighter. It's like a weight has been lifted from their chest. And this is what we say in English.
It's really good to get this stuff off my chest.
If you feel bad or guilty about something that you did to your friend and you finally apologize to that friend, you might say, I'm so sorry. I hope you accept my apology. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my chest. I was so guilty before. If you want to say that someone surprised you and you don't really know why they are showing up in that moment, in English, we say it's like they came out of the woodwork. Or if, someone surprises you with an ability that you didn't know they had, you could say, well, you pulled that out of the woodwork. This just means it's very much a surprise. We weren't expecting the thing.
People started coming out of the woodwork to ask me stuff.
Maybe you're at your house and an old relative knocks on your door and you say, wow, you really came out of the woodwork. This means, I don't know where you came from. I haven't heard about you in many years. I'm surprised to see you. It's a really common phrase in English, out of the woodwork. This next English phrase is definitely a newer one, but I think it's very common now to say this. If someone is so upset that they are actually crying and they're crying really hard, we sometimes say, I'm having an ugly cry. This phrase is more common amongst women when we are just, letting all of our emotions out. We're saying, I'm having an ugly cry about this. So we're crying so hard that we look ugly. So something has gone really wrong if we are ugly crying.
I don't want to ugly cry. No one's even here to see.
Maybe a movie makes you so emotional that you can't contain your emotions enough to not look ugly and cry. So this is a specific type of crying. We're just having an ugly cry because that movie is so sad to us. In English, we don't always say, can you address that? Or can you address that topic? Oftentimes in English, we say, can you speak to that? So this phrase is very common in just everyday life and business English. If someone says, and how much money do you think we can make off of this product? And you are not the expert on money or numbers in your business, you might say, well, Jeff can speak to that. He is the numbers guy. And we say numbers guy to mean that someone that deals with the math or the economics of something in a business.
And then continue until they speak something else.
You can also use this phrase, can you speak to that, as a question to someone. You might say, well, you commented on this before. Can you speak to that? That means just can you provide more details or more opinions on that topic? Many times in English, if someone completes something despite there being many challenges and many obstacles or problems, we can say that they completed something against all odds. This is a really awesome phrase to use when you want to compliment someone's hard work and saying that they didn't give up even when they faced the challenges. You can say you completed this despite all odds.
And against all odds, she fixed it.
A lot of people, they feel like when they go to college, it's so difficult because maybe they don't have a lot of money or, they didn't go to a very prestigious school before, but they're learning with really smart students. They could say, I am going to finish my college degree despite all odds or against all odds. We can also use this phrase in just everyday sports. If there is a team that probably is not going to win, but then against all odds, they win the game, we use this phrase, they beat everyone against all odds. The other day, my husband said, have you seen my car keys? And I started looking all around the house. I looked everywhere. And then my husband realized his car keys were in his pocket. He sent me on what we like to call a wild goose chase. In English, when you say that you sent someone on a wild goose chase, it often means that you made them go look for something or made them try to do something, even though there was no point to doing it.
Yeah, that's a wild goose chase over here at Nakatomi Plaza.
So in this case, my husband had the keys in his pocket. He just forgot to check his pockets, which happens to everyone. And he sent me on a wild goose chase. I was looking all throughout the house, even though he had the keys all along. So there was no point in doing what I was doing. This is a really funny idiom we use, a wild goose chase, to mean that we sent someone to do something, even though there was no point or there was no way they could accomplish the actual thing. In this case, my husband said, I'm so sorry I sent you on a wild goose chase. Instead of saying that you really can't understand something, in English, we use the phrase, I couldn't fathom. We don't actually use the verb to fathom very often in English, but this is just a very dramatic phrase to mean like we could not understand or fathom even if we thought about the problem or the situation for a long time.
I couldn't fathom it.
So sometimes if we think that someone made a really bad decision, like maybe they left their children with a bad babysitter, you could say, I cannot fathom why they would leave their kids with Jill or whoever the bad babysitter is in this story. So it just means like you cannot understand. It's a really dramatic way of speaking. You cannot fathom. The first time I heard this phrase was in my college economics class. The phrase is, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Have you heard this phrase before? This phrase just means in English that even if something seems free, there's always a cost to your decisions.
And they say there's no such thing as a free lunch.
In economics, we use this phrase, there's no such thing as a free lunch, meaning if you go to a lunch and it's free, there's always an opportunity cost. So you could have been doing something else with your time. In everyday English, we use this phrase often to mean that even though someone's offering something for free, they're going to try to sell you something later, or you're going to owe them a favor for accepting something free right now. So maybe one of your friends says, oh, I'll come and help you out. No cost. I can do it for you. Well, you'll say, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That means like there's kind of a catch. Do you need me to help you with something later? Are you going to ask for a favor in return? So you might hear this phrase more and more now that I have taught you there's no such thing as a free lunch. This next phrase is really common when it comes to either gambling or business situations. If someone uses the phrase to go for broke, it means they're betting everything on one situation or one possible outcome.
But in that, I learned how to take risks and go for broke.
So maybe you invest all your money in a startup business. This means a very tiny business that has the potential to make a lot of money, but if you're investing all of your money in it and they don't do well, you're going to be broke. So you're going for broke. That means you are either going to make it really rich or you're going to be broke, meaning having no money. If you describe someone as broke, that means they don't have any money to spend. Another instance you can use this phrase is if they're gambling and they bet all their money on one team. You could say, well, you're really going for broke. That means if you don't win this, you are absolutely going to be broke and down to zero money. Another idiom that is used in everyday English and my students ask me about all the time is to dodge a bullet. So this just means that you have narrowly missed a mistake.
I convinced myself I dodged a bullet.
So recently, a friend of a friend took a job at a company and, the company did really, really bad. It actually went out of business. Well, my friend was thinking about joining their friend at that company right before it went out of business, but then they decided not to take the job. So they really dodged a bullet there. That means they avoided a really bad, kind of dangerous, financially dangerous situation. Maybe you're going to hang out with your friend, but then you cancel plans at the last minute and it turns out your friend had the flu, even though they didn't know it at the time. You kind of dodged a bullet because if you would have hung out with them or spent time with them, you probably would have caught or been infected by their sickness. So you dodged a bullet. A really polite phrase in English is we say, don't hesitate to reach out. When we say to reach out, it means to ask for help or to ask for some information.
Feel free to reach out.
Many times when people email me and say, do you have an English course that would help me improve my vocabulary? I'll say, thank you so much for reaching out. This means asking for help and contacting me. And if you do want to check out my English courses, make sure to visit EnglishWithKayla.com. I've got a new course that's going to be available soon for you to study more vocabulary, just like the vocabulary in this video. But the phrase, don't hesitate to reach out is super common. That just means don't worry about asking for help. I am here to help you at all times. So it's very, very polite to say this in English, either speaking or over email. If you're in a competition and you feel like you are winning, but someone is catching up to you, you might say the other team is right on our tail. We need to keep working hard. This phrase is very versatile, which means you can use it in many different ways to say that someone is directly behind you, either physically behind you or in a competition, they're right behind you in the next place.
They're right on our tail. Red Fox, there's one right on your tail.
They're staying right on our tail.
But they're still on your tail.
One common abbreviation that we use in English is MIA. This expression means missing in action. And I'm sure if you've watched a lot of American television or movies, you have probably heard this expression before. It's very popular. It originated, which means it was first, a term used in the military to describe a soldier, someone who's fighting, that has gone missing and just cannot be found. They are MIA. Now, this is very sad, but in our daily conversation, it's used much more casually. It just means we don't know where someone is. So if you're at a party and someone says, hey, where's Jennifer? You might say, I'm not sure. She's MIA. Nobody has heard from her. That means we have no idea. We're pretty clueless about where Jennifer is. If someone's not at the party, but you knew where they were or you knew why they were not at the party, you wouldn't use this expression. Use this expression when you really don't know where someone has gone. If you've ever been somewhere and you're supposed to meet up with someone and they don't call and you don't know why they didn't show up, you could say, well, they were MIA, so I left. That means they were missing in action, so I just left because I hadn't heard from them.
MIA.
MIA.
Do you think I was born yesterday? This phrase is super sarcastic and snarky in English, which means it's kind of rude way to respond to someone, but it's very popular and it's very used in casual English conversations. It's the same thing as saying, do you think I'm dumb? Do you think I'm like a baby? Was I born yesterday? That means you can't trick me because I'm too knowledgeable. Maybe you have a phrase like this in your language as well. Another way that we would describe using this phrase is we would say, like, do you think I'm gullible? Which means, do you think I will believe anything? Like if your friend said, well, I won the lottery, you might say, yeah, right. Do you think I was born yesterday? That means I don't believe that. The chances of you winning the lottery, which is a ton of money, is so small that I just don't believe you. I'm not gullible. I'm not going to believe a made up story or a lie very easily. So if you want to have an attitude, just say, do you think I was born yesterday?
Do you think I was born yesterday?
I was not born yesterday.
But I wasn't born yesterday.
The next 3 phrases in this lesson are all related. So if you want to ask someone if you are meeting up or doing something together the next day, you might say, are we on for tomorrow? Or are we on for next week? Or are we on for next month? This means, are we going to meet? Is it going to happen? This word on can be used in this way. And this is kind of slang, very casual language. You wouldn't use this phrase in a formal business setting. You can even use this phrase to say, are we on for meeting at the park tomorrow? So this is just asking, is this planned? Is it official?
Are we still on for tomorrow?
Yeah, totally.
We still on for tomorrow night?
Are we on for tonight?
And the best way to respond to this is just to say, yep, we're on, if you're going to meet, if you're going to do the thing. Now, if you want to say that something is canceled, you can say, tomorrow's meeting is off, instead of saying tomorrow's meeting is canceled. This can be used in any sort of situation. This could even be used in a more formal situation. Tomorrow's meeting is off, or we're calling it off. So to say it's off is short for calling it off or canceling it. You might call your friend and say, hey, I'm not feeling well, so tonight's plans are off. This means they are canceled since you're sick.
Call it off.
Call what off?
Call it off, Pam. Call it off, okay?
Call it off.
In English, it's really common to say when you want to research something further, I'm going to delve into it. Or if you want to say we should research this topic or this subject further, we could say, let's delve into it. Let's talk about it more. So this phrase, to delve into something, means to research or explore something more. One thing I can think of that's really common that people delve into in the United States is they research their family's origins. You see, the United States is built of a lot of different immigrants from, many years ago. So some people don't know if their family came from Poland, Germany, Sweden, Norway. There's all these different places that our extended family, our ancestors came from, and we delve into the research to find our origins.
We'll delve into that next week.
Let's delve into your child.
Office where we delve into each other's personal lives.
This next phrase, I would hope so, is used to respond to someone to say that you would want them to have done the thing. Let me give you an example. Your friend might say, I think I studied enough last night. And you would say, I would hope so. This test is going to be hard. This means that, yes, you should have. I would literally hope that you have. So it's a good way to respond to someone when they say something that you kind of agree they should have done. Another way you can use this phrase is your coworker might say, well, I think I can get the project done by Friday. And you think to yourself, well, Friday is the deadline of the project. I would hope so. I'd hope it would be done by Friday. So this just means you're stating something that's kind of obvious to you that you want to point out to them that something they said relates to.
I would hope so.
I would hope so.
I wouldn't hope so.
A good phrase that can be kind of tricky to English learners is the phrase from now on. We use this phrase from now on when we want to talk about our behavior that's going to change from now into the future. We're saying we're kind of going to do this thing forever. So if you've ever sent an email that has some typos or some errors in it, you might say, from now on, I'm going to read my emails 3 times before I send them because I don't want there to be any mistakes. The other day, I mistakenly wrote someone's name incorrectly in the email, and I just think that's such a rude error. So from now on, I'm always going to check that. And that is a real example. I felt so bad spelling someone's name incorrectly. From now on, I will never do that again.
From now on. Nothing bad from now on.
From now on.
From now on.
Instead of saying that you have a lot of work and you're feeling kind of overwhelmed and stressed, in English, you might say, I feel swamped. To be swamped is a phrase that is used really casually in English to say that you have a lot of work to do. So you might say, I can't go out tonight. I am totally swamped with work. This means you have way too many things to do to go out and have fun.
I'm swamped.
I'm just swamped. I've been swamped.
In English, instead of just saying that we are annoyed or just frustrated with someone, a really common way we'll say this is we will say, I am fed up with them. Or you can be fed up with a thing. So you could say, I am just fed up with the government. This means you're frustrated with the government. Maybe your government is taxing you or doing something that you don't like. You're fed up with it. You're frustrated. And this is a really common thing to say in the United States. Or you could say, I am fed up with my best friend. She is always late and never on time. This means you're really frustrated because she's being rude and not showing up at the time that you said you would meet.
Well, I'm fed up with it.
Fed up with work.
And everyone's finally fed up with us.
To lose your touch. This idiom means that you have lost or forgotten or you haven't practiced the skills that you used to be really good at. Maybe you're like me and you used to play a lot of sports. When I was growing up, I played soccer and basketball, and you go to shoot a basketball and it is not even close to going in. You could say, wow, I've really lost my touch. I haven't played basketball in so long. Now you could tell someone that they haven't lost their touch. This means that even though they haven't done something in a very long time, they're still really good at it. For instance, you might tell a grandmother who, is good with a baby, wow, you haven't lost your touch. Even though she hasn't had babies for many years, she's still really good at calming and playing with a baby.
How did we lose touch?
You're losing your touch, amigo. I'm really losing my touch.
When you don't have time for small talk, you might just tell someone to cut to the chase. Now, this could be really rude to say, so be careful how you use this phrase, to cut to the chase. But you could say, hey, I'm going to skip this part of the story and just cut to the chase. This means you're going to skip to the main part. So this phrase is really used when you're in a rush. You might tell someone that you work with, hey, I don't have time to explain everything right now. I'll just cut to the chase. I need your help. So this means you're not even going to tell them the story of why you need their help because you're in a hurry and you're just going to tell them what's important.
Still, cut to the chase. Cut to the chase?
Let's cut to the chase.
When you want to say that someone has done something thinking it was going to be a good thing, but it turns out to you it really wasn't helpful or actually turned out to be a bad thing, you could say that they did the thing with the best intentions. This phrase comes to mind when I think of a small child thinking that they are going to decorate their mom and dad's house. Maybe they color on the walls and just make a huge mess. They had the best intentions, but it turns out they really were just making a mess. So I'm saying they wanted to help. They were doing it because they thought it was a good thing. They had good intentions, the best intentions, actually. But obviously, we don't want our children coloring on the walls or making huge messes at our house.
I had the best intentions.
With the best intentions.
I'm sure all lunatics have the best intentions.
This phrase, to make a mockery of something, or we can say it to make a joke of something, it means that we are being disrespectful to someone who's trying to be serious or seriously teach something or have a serious conversation. So an example that comes to mind for this phrase is if you're ever in school and the teacher is, really trying hard to teach the class, but there's someone in the class that keeps joking around and making fun of the teacher or making loud noises. The teacher might say, stop making a joke of this or stop making a mockery of this. Mockery is probably used more formally. In our everyday English, we say, stop making a joke of this. This just means that you're not taking this seriously and you're kind of ruining it for everyone else. So this can be used in a lot of different situations when someone is being rude or disrespectful in a serious situation. They're not supposed to be rude, but they are being rude and they're kind of making everything funny that's not supposed to be funny.
We made a mockery of.
Making a mockery of me and everything I stand for.
Despite your constant mockery.
Do you know someone that's always on the ball? This English phrase means someone who always is prepared. They're always thinking ahead. Someone who is on the ball will always remember everyone's birthdays. They'll send a card in advance. They'll never say happy late birthday because they already know it's your birthday coming up. They'll be early to every meeting. Not only will they be early to a meeting, they'll be completely prepared. Maybe they've even printed off notes, or they just have something to share with everyone. Someone who is on the ball is used to describe someone who is just completely prepared. So it's quite a compliment to say that someone is on the ball. And this is kind of a sports idiom. It comes from the idea that in soccer or in other sports, if you're right on the ball, you're working really hard. You're very, very prepared trying to help your team win the game. I always say that American English speakers are some of the most dramatic English speakers. A lot of our phrases are very hyperbolic, meaning we're much more dramatic than we actually are thinking in our heads. So if we want to call a food really good or delicious, we could say, it's to die for. We often use this with foods. We might say, oh, those chocolate brownies are to die for, as if they're so good you'll sacrifice your life for them. That's not really what we're saying. It's really an idiom that we're just being dramatic with. We can also say, Kim Kardashian has so many great clothes that are to die for. Of course, this is being dramatic too. If you really liked her clothes, you might use this phrase. Do you know someone who is often distracted or daydreaming? Well, you could say that they're spacing out all of the time. So the phrase to space out means just to be daydreaming, not thinking about anything. Maybe you walk up to a receptionist or a secretary and you're waiting to speak to them. They might just be spacing out. So to space out means just to be really distracted. And a person who is often distracted or who is often spacing out, we can use the adjective spacey to describe them. So we could say, he is really spacey. He just is never paying attention. And of course, you wouldn't want someone to space out while they're driving on the road, because it's very important to be paying attention and not distracted while you're driving a car. So don't space out.
You just spaced out.
I just spaced out.
You space out.
When you want to say that you are going to take a significant risk or make a commitment, you can say you're going to take the plunge. I feel like this expression is really commonly used when people are thinking about getting married. They might say, we're thinking about taking the plunge. And normally the literal definition of taking a plunge is jumping into a pool or jumping into a lake, plunging into the water. But in this expression, we're talking about starting a commitment, a serious commitment. So some people starting a business is like taking a plunge for them because it's a very serious commitment that they're going to try, or maybe they're going to quit their regular 9-to-5 day job to take the plunge and start a business.
Then take the plunge.
All right, who's going to take the plunge?
Hey, Chip, ready to take the plunge?
A similar expression that's used just a little bit differently is to give it a whirl. If you want to say that you're going to try something, even though you don't really know how to do it or you've never done it before, you can say, well, I'll give it a whirl. If you've never played chess before, give it a whirl. It's pretty fun. That means try it even though you really don't know what you're doing. Or maybe you've never gone skiing before and you want to learn how. You're going to try it this winter. You'll say, I'm going to give skiing a whirl this winter. This means you're going to try it even though you might not be very good at it. Do you know someone who's constantly on the go? This phrase is very, very common in English to say that someone is always moving. They're always doing things. You can also use this phrase as an adjective, like we're going to eat on the go. This means you might be taking your food in the car or walking while you're eating and going somewhere because you don't have time to sit down and have a meal. So this phrase is incredibly useful to use in English, doing something on the go. You can also say that you are going to learn something on the go. That means you're going to learn it while you're doing it. You've never done it before. No one's explained it to you. So you're going to learn on the go. A lot of jobs you will learn on the go because it's hard to just teach without actually doing the job first. Congratulations on adding 21 new English expressions to your vocabulary. I promise you that native speakers will recognize when you use these English expressions because they're so common and popular to us. and it will just sound so natural in your conversations. Make sure to visit EnglishWithKayla.com to learn more expressions with me, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Goodbye! Did you know that sometimes in English we call people guinea pigs? Now, this is not an insult to someone. We're not saying that they look like the animal or the rodent guinea pigs.
You'll be my guinea pig and protege.
But we're actually just saying that we're using them for a trial or trying something with the person that we're calling the guinea pig for the first time. So this comes from the idea that sometimes in like laboratory experiments, scientific experiments, instead of testing something on a person, we test it on an animal like a guinea pig. So if you try out a new computer program or a new software at your work, and nobody has used this process before, your boss might say, well, you're the guinea pig, so you'll have to let us know how it works or if it can get the job done. This means that you are like the trial person. We're using you to try it for the first time. Another very interesting phrase that we use in English that you might have not come across before is a lemon. We're not talking about the fruit, but we're talking about something that was built and it just has never worked. This is really common when someone gets a car and it has so many problems that the car company takes it back because they figure it was not built correctly. We call that a lemon. So some states in the United States, they actually have what we call a lemon law. So if you buy a brand new car, if in the first year or so many things break and go wrong, you can get your money back from that car because basically we're saying that car is so defective, it was not built properly. It was not designed properly. So if you get something, a product mainly, and it just never works, you can say, well, that one was kind of a lemon, meaning it was very, very poor quality. This phrase is a really great phrase to use when someone is really incorrect about something and you don't want to just say, oh, you're totally wrong. Because sometimes that can come off as a little bit rude. Instead, in English, we'll say, well, I think you're just a little bit off base on this. This means you're not really thinking about this correctly, but it's kind of a more polite way to say it. Another way we can say it is if you are wrong about something, you can say, well, I'm just off base about this.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, Marcy. I don't want to be off base here.
So maybe you make an assumption about someone and you say, oh, I didn't think that you would like this, but I was totally off base. This means you were incorrect because it turns out the person actually liked the thing that you were talking about. When I was much younger, I thought living in a big city like New York City would just be so amazing and glamorous. But the first time I visited there, I figured out it's not all it's cracked up to be. Now, this is just my opinion, but I think that large cities are kind of noisy, kind of polluted, a little bit too crowded. Some people like that lifestyle, but for me, that's not it's all cracked up to be.
Yeah, well, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
This idiom is used when you want to say that something is not as good as it's described. A lot of times people will like a movie and they'll suggest it to you and you go and see the movie and you say, well, that movie was not all it's cracked up to be. So this is a really casual phrase. It's very informal to say that something was described better than it actually was. A lot of times people go to a college or a university and they start out, in a certain program for a degree, and they figure out it's not their true calling. In English, we use this phrase, a true calling, to describe what a person was born to do or what their skills best match. We usually use this phrase when we're talking about a certain career, or we'll say, oh, my true calling was to be a mother or a father.
Now that Murney's found his true calling.
Some people will go to school, like myself, and they'll be trying to get a business degree, but then they'll realize that their true calling is to be in education and to be teaching people. This is exactly what happened to me. Or maybe you try to work in the corporate world, but you realize your true calling is to be a musician or an artist. This just means that that's where your skills are best suited. That feels like it's what you were meant to do. It's very natural. You are totally going to think I'm crazy for this next idiom, but American English speakers actually say this. If someone is out for blood, it means that they're doing things in order to seek revenge or in order to harm someone for something.
They're out for blood. You can't fool around.
So maybe this idiom is pretty popular when you're playing sports. The other team has a player that seems to not care if they're injuring people. They just want to win the game. You could say that player is out for blood. And it's similar to saying, they're out for vengeance, revenge. If someone is doubting you, maybe they're doubting your abilities or they're doubting your knowledge, and you feel like, why are you doubting me? Just try me. This is the phrase that we use, try me. So someone might be saying, oh, I don't think you know how to do this. You can say, well, try me. I bet I know how to do it.
Try me.
Look. Or if someone's saying, oh, I'm way too good at, let's say you're playing Scrabble. I bet that you can't beat me. Say, well, try me. Let's play. So this is just, kind of a challenge. Like, I bet I can beat you, or I bet I do know this thing. Try me. This next idiom is one of those phrases that has been used forever in the United States, and it's still used today. It can be said two different ways. Sometimes we say, don't cry over spilled milk, or there's no use crying over spilled milk. So this is a classic idiom. Maybe you have one just like it in your first language. That means, don't worry about something very minor.
I don't cry over it. I appreciate it.
Right.
And this idiom also suggests, you can't change this situation. Don't cry over it. Don't worry about it so much. Just move on, clean it up, and keep going. So oftentimes, I literally say to my kids when they spill milk, there's no use crying over spilled milk. Don't worry about it. Let's clean it up. And next time, let's not spill. So we can use this idiom very often in English when someone breaks something or something small goes wrong, but we can't change the situation. Let's just clean it up and move on with our lives. When someone is constantly overworked or overstressed, we use this phrase, they're pushed to the brink. Or, if you're trying to argue with someone or annoy them, and finally they just, quit the argument or they leave, you could say, well, they were pushed to the brink. That means they were so annoyed, agitated, or angered that they just quit or they just went away because they were pushed to the brink. So the brink in this phrase is like the limit.
I told you I was on the brink.
Maybe you've had a terrible roommate at some point in your life. They left out dirty dishes. They were disrespectful. They were partying at all hours of the night. And finally, you were just pushed to the brink by something bad they did. And you had to move out of the house or the apartment. So when you say that you push someone to the brink, it means you push them to their limit. If you are overworked, we often use the phrase, we were pushed to the brink of exhaustion. That means we're so tired we couldn't do anything else. This next phrase is used so commonly in English, and I've heard this phrase forever, but it's a little bit difficult to describe for me because it comes so naturally in the English language. The phrase is wherewithal, and I don't see this written much in English, but in spoken English, it's used all the time. So the most classic example of this phrase is when you wake up in the middle of the night and, there's something going on and you can't even think, you can't even see because you just woke up. You say, I didn't have the wherewithal to know what's going on. This just means like you're basically half asleep. You didn't have the brain power or the thinking to understand what you should do next.
Or have the wherewithal to hire someone.
Or if you want to say that someone isn't very smart, or maybe they don't have a lot of resources and, they want to start a business, but you don't think they can do it. You could say they don't have the wherewithal to start a business. So I most frequently use this phrase if I am sleepy and I just can't do something. I say I don't have the wherewithal to get this done. That's the most common way I hear this phrase in English. And in contrast, you could say I was asleep, but I did have the wherewithal to wake up and, get everyone out of the house, or because the house is on fire, or something like that. So you can use this phrase in the positive or the negative. You had the wherewithal or you didn't have the wherewithal. A common idiom in English that means that someone is too late in their actions to either be helpful or effective in a situation is we say they are a day late and $1 short. So maybe you see someone that you really want to ask out on a date, but you wait a long time to build up the courage, and by the time you ask them on a date, they already are seeing someone, they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You could say, well, I was a day late and $1 short. So even though I finally built up this courage, there was no point because I was too late and I just didn't have enough courage before.
A day late and $1 short.
So this can be just kind of a comedic or playful phrase in English too. If someone literally just shows up late and they're not going to be helpful anymore, you say, sorry, you're a day late and $1 short. Have you ever heard someone describe something in English as black and white? In English, we use the phrase black and white in an idiomatic way rather than literal, just to say that something is black and white. We mean it's for sure. You can't argue with that thing. Or sometimes we'll say that something is not black and white, which means it is up for interpretation or there's no one correct answer. Let me give you a couple examples to help you understand how we use this phrase in English. When I was in college, I had to take classes like mathematics and physics. And in those classes, when you take a test, the answer is pretty black and white. There's always a correct answer. And if you don't get that correct answer, then you are wrong. Now, when I took classes that were like literature and art classes, if you did an assignment, it was kind of not just black and white. The teacher could say you either did a good job or a bad job, just depending on their opinion. It wasn't so black and white.
Black and white?
In black and white.
It's pretty black and white.
Next, let's talk about what it means when an English speaker says that something is a gray area. This phrase is extremely common to say that something is a gray area. Now, this phrase is kind of like saying something isn't black and white, but instead we use this phrase more often when we're talking about something that isn't quite legal or illegal. It's a gray area. Or if something is not against the rules, but it's not technically following the rules either. Let me give you a couple examples. One example of a gray area that I can think of that's really common in American workplaces is when you're not sure if something is your job to do or if it's your coworker's job to do. And your boss says, hey, this needs to get done. It's kind of a gray area whose responsibility it is, but typically someone just does the job because even though no one's assigned to it, it's not black and white who's supposed to be doing it. They'll do it just because it needs to get done. So things that you're not sure who are supposed to be doing the thing, that's a gray area in the workplace.
Escapades are gray area.
Oh, honey, gray area.
It's the gray area.
A really common idiom that English learners always learn is that there is a silver lining to things in life. A silver lining is what we call the positive aspect to an otherwise very negative situation. So for instance, even though someone is sick, the silver lining is at least they get to stay at home and watch a lot of movies. Or even though it rained outside and we couldn't go outside today, the silver lining is that our plants will grow and our garden will grow and we'll have beautiful flowers tomorrow. So it's finding the positive aspects in otherwise bad or negative situations in life. The silver lining.
Well, silver lining.
Well, silver lining.
Silver lining.
One phrase that I really like to teach to my English students is brownie points. You might hear an American English speaker, or you might hear me say that you get brownie points for something. Now, brownie points is like this made-up point system. It's not real. There's no real points or scoring for this. But when someone does something just to be nice or just to do something really good for you, just because they want you to either like them or just think favorably of them, you can say, well, you get brownie points for that. So it's not real points, but it's just points that are made up and you're just saying like, I really like that. That's going to make me happy and that's going to make me like you. Sometimes if you have an older neighbor and you help them with something, like maybe you cut their lawn or maybe you help them bring in their groceries to their house, you might just get brownie points for that. People think that you're a good person just because you did that. Or if you're at work and you want your boss to like you, you might do something that is out of your way to do something really good. For instance, you finish a project early and you say, hey boss, got this to you early. They'll say, nice job. You get brownie points. That means they just think favorably of you or they like you because you did something extra.
Trying to score brownie points with your sister.
Brownie points for taking a nap.
A really great phrase that we use in English to describe something that is a very rare and very great opportunity is we say that something is a golden opportunity. So for many people, immigrating to the United States is a golden opportunity because there are a lot of things that you can do here. Like you could start a business, you can go to school. As long as you get a visa to come here, it's a golden opportunity. I know it's not very easy to come here for most people and get a visa, so it's kind of a golden opportunity. Sometimes if you get a job interview for a job that normally doesn't hire, or it's just a really well-paying job, you could say, this is a golden opportunity for me. The job interview is a golden opportunity because you don't normally get such a great interview for a great job.
But you'll miss some golden opportunities.
You got a golden opportunity here.
This is a golden opportunity.
Let's move on to some darker colors. I've got a ton of idioms and phrases involving the color black in English. First of all, let's talk about what it means to be pitch black. You could say it's pitch black outside. That means there is no moon in the sky, there's no street lights, it's just very dark. You cannot see anything. Even if you were to walk outside with no flashlight, you wouldn't be able to see your hand in front of you because it's pitch black. So when there's no light, in English we use that phrase, pitch black.
Ow! It's pitch black in here.
Pitch black? Is it pitch black?
One way that we describe someone who is very physically injured, especially if they have a lot of bruises, we say that they are black and blue. Now, this is just a very common way to say that someone has a lot of injuries or bruises from either an accident or maybe they've been beat up by another person, or if you sprain your ankle and it starts swelling up and turning bruising colors like kind of purpley, black, and bluish. We say, wow, my ankle is turning black and blue. It's a very common phrase used to say that your injury is getting kind of bad and it's bruising.
Black and blue.
Like black and blue?
Black and blue. Fight night.
A really important phrase to know in English is blackout drunk. Now, sometimes people just say blackout or they say blackout drunk. If you want to describe someone who has drank so much alcohol that they won't remember the evening, you can say they are blackout drunk. And it obviously is not a good thing to be this intoxicated or drunk from alcohol.
Seriously, blackout drunk.
Because you were like blackout drunk?
You might have this next idiom in your first language. If you describe someone as the black sheep of a group or the black sheep of your family, it means they are very different from the other people around them. And it's usually perceived as a negative thing to be the black sheep. For instance, if a family has a lot of successful people in it, maybe the mom is a lawyer, the dad is a doctor, several of the kids have gone on to be lawyers and doctors, but then one of the kids maybe doesn't want to take that career path. Maybe that child does something more creative, like become an artist or a musician. We often say that they are the black sheep of the family. Now, sometimes we say this in a more joking manner, but sometimes it really is perceived as a very negative thing to be the black sheep of your family, because when we say that someone is the black sheep, it means they don't fit in.
Black sheep.
He was
The black sheep.
So the black sheep returns.
Blue, blue, blue. Let's move on to some idioms involving the color blue. Now, the first idiom involving the color blue is the opposite of white collar, which we talked about earlier, in the idiom or phrase that we like to use to describe jobs that work with their hands, like construction or gardening, is blue collar. Now, I think this phrase comes from the idea that a lot of, industrial workers that work with their hands, they used to wear, those blue shirts, those blue working shirts that say their name on them. So the phrase blue collar came from this. And then usually white collar people, they don't get dirty at work, so they wear nice white pressed shirts to work. So I'm not saying that blue collar is bad. Blue collar workers are so important because they do the jobs that help keep our houses nice, keep our buildings nice, keep our streets nice. Blue collar workers are so important, and it's important to know this phrase for English because someone might describe your job as white collar or blue collar.
Attention, blue collar workers.
Blue collar cop. Blue collar, white collar, a woman, a man.
The next phrase you might hear someone say when they are extremely sad, if they are singing in a certain style and they're singing about their problems or their sorrows, we call that singing the blues. Now, typically in the English language, blue is associated with sadness. So Adele is someone I think of as she kind of sings the blues. She sings about heartbreak and things like that when she is sad. Now, I can teach you English until I'm blue in the face, but if you don't practice, you will not get better. This phrase, to do something until you are blue in the face, it means you keep doing something that's challenging even, and you do it and do it and do it, but you don't receive any results. So a lot of people will use this phrase, you can do this until you're blue in the face, but you won't see any results until you do this other thing. So my example was, you can watch English lessons until you're blue in the face, or I can teach you English until I'm blue in the face. But if you don't practice, you won't actually receive results. So make sure that you're using all of the phrases in today's English lesson in your real life conversations, or if you're watching television or movies, hopefully you'll see these phrases as well. And if you want the extra practice, make sure to use the link down below in the description of today's video to download the PDF that goes along with the definitions and example sentences from this lesson.
You can deny it till you're blue in the face.
That's what I've been trying to tell you. Until I'm blue in the face.
I was talking about Adele earlier in this lesson, and this next phrase is from her song, Someone Like You. But we also use this phrase in English all of the time. So when we say that something came out of the blue, like when she says, I hate to come out of the blue uninvited, it means you come out of nowhere. You come out of the sky, just out of nowhere. You don't know where someone came from. It was very unexpected if something comes out of the blue. So one thing that always brightens my day and makes me happy is when an old friend calls me or texts me out of the blue. It's so fun to hear from them. That means there's no reason why they called or texted you, and it wasn't really expected, but all of a sudden they just think of you and they text you something nice. Or one great thing at work is if you got a promotion out of the blue. That means you weren't expecting it, but for some reason your boss just offers you more money and a better job. That would be great out of the blue, right?
Out of the blue.
Alone out of the blue.
That's out of the blue.
Now, we talked about all of these color idioms, and now we're going to move on to the color red. We talked about how blue can often be associated with sadness. Well, I associate red typically with anger or, warnings, things like that. So think about that when you interpret idioms and phrases in English. What the different types of colors can be associated with, which feelings. The first idiom I'm going to teach you is when we call something a red flag. You might have an idiom or phrase similar to this in your first language as well. If we say, well, that was a red flag, it means it was kind of a warning that made us a little bit nervous. For instance, If you go on a date with someone and they say, well, I still live with my mom and actually I don't have a job, those might be red flags to you because you might be thinking, well, why aren't you working and why don't you have your own place if you're an adult? You know, those could be red flags. But some people, that might not be a red flag. I don't know. For some people, you know, maybe they really like music and they are a big music lover and they're on a date and someone says, I hate music. That could be a red flag to them as well. So there's a lot of red flags when it comes to getting in relationships with people. And also, you know, maybe you're thinking about buying a house or moving into a house and the landlord or whoever says, you know, well, we do have some bugs in the house sometimes, but it's not really a big deal. You might think, well, that's kind of a red flag. Why did they say only sometimes? You know, maybe the problem might be bigger than they're describing. Just even mentioning it to you might get you worried, and that's a red flag to you. So that's what we mean in English when we say that something is a red flag. It means it kind of makes us nervous, and it's kind of a warning to us that something bigger could be wrong.
No red flags.
Big red flag.
Red flag, everybody.
When you live in the United States, we have a really big government and we have lots of types of government. We have, you know, the federal government, we have state government, and we have local government. With all of these governments, sometimes when you want to do something like start a business, build a building, pay your taxes, there is a lot of red tape. Now, this phrase, red tape, it means there is an excessive amount of bureaucracy or a lot of paperwork or different rules that you have to follow. And a lot of times, if there's red tape involved with doing something, it just means that there's a lot of formal things that you have to do, and it can kind of make things difficult to get done. This phrase might be a little bit confusing, so let me give you an example. If you want to improve your house, maybe you want to build onto your house. Well, here in the United States, typically you have to go to the local government and you have to get a building permit and you have to submit sort of plans, maybe from an architect, and you have to get a contractor out and they have to, you know, assess everything and submit more paperwork. That is a lot of red tape just to do something to your house as small as adding one room. Or recently, I had to get a new water heater in my house so we could take hot showers. Well, we actually had to get a building permit just to get that installed in our house. So that was a little bit of red tape just for something that seemed very minor, just replacing one thing in the house that was already there. So red tape can be a bit annoying, especially here in the United States. Have you ever heard of someone being caught red-handed? In English, this phrase, red-handed, it means they are caught in the act, or someone sees the person committing a crime or breaking their rule. It's not like they figured it out later. They saw you red-handed. That means you were actually doing the thing that you weren't supposed to do. I always think of this phrase as, you know, when young children want a cookie and they ask their parents and their parents say, no, you can't have a cookie right now. The child might just, you know, try to sneak and grab a cookie from the cookie jar, and their parent sees them doing it and they said, hey, no, you can't have a cookie. I just told you no. And the kid will say, oh, I wasn't trying to get a cookie. You might say, I caught you red-handed. That means I saw you doing the thing. So if you see someone committing a crime, you have caught them red-handed.
Red-handed.
Caught red-handed.
The last idiom in today's English lesson can be said two ways. People often say the grass isn't always greener on the other side, or some people say the grass is greener on the other side. So this just describes a situation that you're in. Let me give you an example of how this phrase, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, can be used. So some people in the United States, they live places where the weather is extremely cold in the winter. And they'll say, geez, I wish I lived somewhere that wasn't so cold in the winter. Some people will say to them, kind of giving advice, they'll say, well, the grass isn't greener on the other side because places that don't have this cold winter, they just have a really hot and unbearable summer. So this means that the other person's situation, just because it's different than yours, it's not always better than yours. Or if you wanted to say that the situation is better, you could say, well, the grass is greener on the other side. So this phrase, it's more commonly used the first way I described it, but it can be used both ways.
The grass is always greener on the other side.
Which side the grass is greener on?
To make a federal case out of something.
Let's not make a federal case of this.
To not make a big federal case about it.
Now, this idiom is super interesting because in the United States, you can commit a crime that's a federal crime, or you commit a crime that's a state crime. Now, typically, federal crimes carry harsher punishment in the United States. So one really unique thing here is we have the United States postal system. If you damage a mailbox on purpose, of course, you are committing a federal crime. And actually, even though this crime doesn't seem too crazy, it can carry up to 3 years in jail and $250,000 in fines. So this is an interesting way to teach you the idiom to make a federal case out of something. If someone is making a big deal out of something that you think is not a big deal, it's a minor thing, you can say, why are you making a federal case out of this? This means, why are you making this such a big issue for everyone? Maybe when you were in school, someone borrowed a pencil and another person said, hey, you took my pencil, give me my pencil back. And the person says, I don't have your pencil. You might say, you guys, don't make such a federal case out of this. It's just a pencil. This means don't make a big deal. Don't have a big fight or a big problem over this. One thing that my English language students seem to have a hard time understanding when they first hear it is why American English speakers say that they're named after someone or something. For me, I'm named after my grandma. My middle name is the same name as my grandma. That means this is the way that my parents thought of this name. Some people are named after a city, which means that their parents liked the name of a city or a place so much that they gave their child the same name. So for instance, some people are named Paris. They're named after the city of Paris. Are you named after someone or are you named after something? An English speaker might ask you this question, and sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes no, your parents just liked the name. Especially across different cultures, most cultures, their names are coming from somewhere. They're named after something or someone. To push the envelope.
They didn't push the envelope.
Kind of pushing the envelope there.
So when we use this idiom, we are not at all talking about a physical envelope or envelope, as I said before. You can say this word two different ways. You'll hear it said two different ways by American English speakers. I think it just depends on where you're from in the United States, envelope or envelope. But when you say that someone is pushing the envelope, it means they're going beyond the boundaries that are already established, or they're being very innovative. For instance, I always think of Lady Gaga back before she was incredibly famous. She would just try to push the envelope. For instance, one time Lady Gaga wore a dress that was entirely made out of meat, which seems really strange, but it just pushed the envelope of fashion and it made people really draw their attention to her. You could say it was innovative. I would say it's a little strange, but it pushed the envelope of fashion. Many people would say people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk pushed the envelope of technology. In the English language, we have so many ways of saying go fast. One way that I thought of the other day that's super common here is to say gun it. When you tell someone in the car to gun it, it means go as fast as they can, to push the gas pedal down as hard as they can. This idiom is really typically used for just driving. You wouldn't tell your friend that's running to gun it. It's really just used when we're talking about pushing the gas pedal aggressively or forcefully.
This next phrase definitely started off in the English language as slang, but nowadays it is an everyday conversation, so I feel like I have to teach it to you. When we say that someone is throwing shade,
I'm just trying to say, don't throw shade in our relationship.
We mean that they are criticizing someone a little bit too harshly. Maybe you have a group of friends and one of the friends isn't there and, let's just name her Becky. Your other friend, Rachel, says, "Oh, I hate it when Becky, comes. She just thinks she's so cool. Don't you think that she has such a weird attitude?" She's throwing shade at Becky. And sometimes it's not so obvious that someone is throwing shade. Maybe they're just being very passive aggressive. They keep saying things like, well, Becky always does this. Becky always does that. And they're not being super negative, but you feel like they're throwing shade. This just means you feel like they are criticizing someone passive aggressively. If you want to say to someone that they need to stop criticizing you, you can say, "Can you stop throwing shade? Can you stop throwing shade at me?" That would be, "Can you stop criticizing me or saying negative things about me?" Sometimes in life, when you have an opportunity come to you and you feel like it was really easy, you didn't have to go out of your way to get that opportunity. In English, we say that the opportunity fell into your lap.
It fell into my lap. Just like it's gonna fall into yours.
For instance, maybe a friend calls you and says, "Hey, I have 2 extra tickets to a concert on Friday. Do you want them? I can't go." You say, "Well, that just fell into my lap." Sure, that means you didn't have to go to a huge effort to buy some concert tickets or, go online super early in the morning to try to purchase them. The tickets just fell in your lap. You just got them easily from a friend that didn't want them anymore. Sometimes in English, when we're kind of criticizing someone because they didn't have to work for something, you can say, "Well, that just fell into your lap." That means you got whatever opportunity or job or whatever it might be so easily, like you didn't have to work. Speaking of working, have you ever known someone who just likes to sleep the day away? If we want to say that someone just sleeps way too late, we often say, "Hey, don't sleep the day away." Now, this phrase, "the day away," we can use this with a lot of different actions. We can say, "Hey, are you just reading the day away?" This means you're sitting and reading a book so long that the day is almost going to be gone. You're going to spend all your time doing that activity. Sometimes when I start cleaning, it feels like I'm cleaning the day away. I just cannot stop cleaning. It's using up all my time in the day. For crying out loud.
Crying out loud!
You will hear Americans use this expression all the time, and it's more of a mild exclamation when you're, a bit upset about something, you're surprised about something, or you're annoyed about something, and it's better than saying an inappropriate swear word. For instance, if you're driving and the driver in front of you is going way too slow for the flow of traffic, they're going well below the speed limit, you'll say, "For crying out loud, why is this person driving so slow?" So you'll definitely hear American speakers use this phrase when they're super annoyed at something or they're just kind of surprised. "For crying out loud, I can't believe food has gotten so expensive." Like, we're annoyed, we can't believe it. When we want to say that someone has done something a little bit too much, we say that they have overdone it.
It's better to overdo it.
Or if we want to warn someone not to do something so much, we can say, "Don't overdo it." So for instance, you might tell your children, "Don't overdo it on candy," or "Don't overdo it on television." Or you could say, "I don't like my food super spicy, so don't overdo the spice." We use this phrase to mean don't do something excessively or too much. A lot of times when you're learning a new language, you don't understand why something is funny, or you didn't understand why there was a joke in what a person has just said. We actually have a phrase that means just this. We say we've missed the joke. So sometimes you might have a joke, and if a person doesn't laugh, you might say, "Oh, I think you missed the joke." That means, you didn't understand why that was funny. Maybe there was something that happened earlier that you didn't know about, or for some reason you didn't understand the joke. Or if you don't understand why everyone's laughing, you could say, "Hey, I missed the joke. What's so funny?" So this phrase, "to miss a joke," means someone doesn't understand why something was funny or a joke. One time I had a new job and the person who was in the same role as me before was very good at the job. And so all of my new coworkers said, "You have big shoes to fill."
You have big shoes to fill following your husband like that.
So when you say this phrase, "you have big shoes to fill," it's an idiom that means there are high expectations for you in this role or position or job because the person who had the position before did really good things as well. Oftentimes when sports teams get a new coach, if the last coach was very successful and had won a championship, the fans of the team might say, "You have big shoes to fill." In English, we have two phrases that you have to know that means that someone is indecisive. When someone is indecisive, they cannot make a decision. Sometimes we say they are wishy-washy.
You're so wishy-washy.
And sometimes we say they can't make up their mind. Wishy-washy, or saying that someone can't make up their mind, it just completely means that they cannot make a decision or they cannot be sure about something. A lot of times we will be critical of politicians in the United States that seem to change their decision on something, and we'll say they're very wishy-washy. So this term, wishy-washy, it's definitely used in a more negative way than saying that someone is indecisive or they can't make up their mind. If you want to say almost the opposite of this last phrase, you can say that someone is sticking to something.
You've never been able to stick to a decision.
Oftentimes when we say that someone is very committed to a goal, they are not going to quit. We can say they are going to stick to their goal. This means they're not going to quit or change their mind on what they want to do. Maybe they said they are going to lose 50 pounds by the end of the year. You would say that they are sticking to their goal of losing 50 pounds by the end of the year because they're exercising every day and they are eating healthy no matter what. Oftentimes in English, we also say we're going to stick to our decision if we're not going to change our mind or be wishy-washy. We're going to make a decision, yes or no. Maybe our decision is yes on something, and we are going to do it because we said yes. We are going to stick to our decision or stick to our promise even. When something has failed to meet your expectations, you can say that it was a letdown.
You might be let down.
So you can use letdown as a verb, meaning to disappoint someone, or if you want to just describe a whole situation or a whole event or even a person as disappointing, you can say it is a letdown. Maybe you watched a movie on Netflix that someone said is so good, it's going to be amazing, you're going to be so surprised and thrilled at the movie. But when you watch the movie, you actually think it's pretty boring and you stop halfway through. You can say that movie was a total letdown. It was a disappointment. You might have heard this next phrase if you have a friend in English that uses a lot of slang. If we say we are all about something,
damn, I forgot all about it.
It just means we're very enthusiastic about something and we want to do it or we agree to something. And the opposite, I'm not about that. It just means you disapprove of it, you don't want to do it, or you're just not enthusiastic or excited about it. For instance, your friend might say, "What do you think about getting pizza tonight?" You might say, "I'm all about that if you love pizza." Or you could say, "I'm not about that. I am on a diet. I cannot be eating pizza." Or maybe your friend suggests going camping and you can say, "I am all about that. I love getting outside." Or if you are a person that prefers to go on vacation where you stay in a hotel and you don't like bugs or going outside, you might say, "I am not about that. I do not want to go camping." There are two phrases that I want to bring your attention to in English that English speakers will use in their everyday conversations when they're telling a long story and they want to skip over some details and just give you a quick summary of the main point. So oftentimes you will hear English speakers either say, "to make a long story short," or "long story short." And another phrase that we use in English is "all that to say."
All right. All that to say, yes, I like men.
So we say all that to say you should never text while driving. So maybe you just told a long story about someone getting in a car accident and getting injured because they were texting while they're driving. And instead of telling all the details, you'll maybe just summarize and say all that to say, just don't text and drive. So you summarize your main point after you say all that to say. So like, I had a long story, but here's the main point. So we'll say that, or sometimes we say long story short. Another informal phrase that we'll use in English, and this phrase is, there's not a certain definition of this, but you'll hear it in a lot of different contexts. It's to bust out something.
You can't bust out of here.
So when someone brings an item out that they either haven't had out and shown people in a long time, or they're just being very extravagant and extra when they bring it out, we say they're busting it out. So for instance, if your dad or your brother or someone in your family plays the guitar, but they don't play every day, maybe only on special occasions, and finally they bring out the guitar and they sing Wonderwall, you can say, my dad just bust out the guitar again. That means, he brought it out and wanted a lot of attention. Sometimes parents will bust out old photos when you have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend at your house, just to kind of embarrass you and, show them these old things that they don't normally have out to see, but they're busting them out. They're showing them, and it's kind of extravagant and extra. Another really funny way to use this phrase is we say like, where did you bust out those moves? This means like when someone starts dancing and you've never seen them dance before, you can say, where did you bust out those moves? They're really dancing and they're really into the song. Or sometimes we say just bust a move, which means someone is dancing in a really extra and extravagant way. So this phrase, to bust out, you'll hear a ton in English conversation and everyday conversation. If you ever watch advertisements or commercials in English, you'll often hear the speaker say, something is right around the corner.
Right around the corner. To the right as you go out the door.
So we're not talking about a physical location when we say it's right around the corner, but we mean that something is coming up in a short amount of time. So a lot of times in advertisements, they'll say Christmas is right around the corner. This means they want you to anticipate Christmas because it's coming up very soon on the calendar. Or you might say to someone, graduation is right around the corner. Have you thought about what you want to do with your career? So because you're going to graduate from college in such a short amount of time, it's important that you anticipate what you're going to do for a job next. If you ever want to ask someone's opinion on something in English in a very casual way, you might ask someone, what's your take?
What's your take on all this, honestly?
So when you use this phrase, what's your take? It just means the exact same thing as what's your opinion on this? Or sometimes we say, do you want to hear my take? This means, do you want to hear my opinion or my view of the situation here? Sometimes on podcasts, I hear the host say, I have a hot take on this. This means that they have a controversial opinion on something, or a very original opinion on something that not a lot of other people might share. In a business situation, your boss might say, now that I've told you guys how I feel about this, I want to hear all of your takes on it. This means all of your opinions. So in English, we can use take and opinion interchangeably. I would say take is a bit more casual, but it's becoming more and more popular in everyday speech. You may have heard an English speaker before warn someone to not get ahead of themselves.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
This phrase is used to caution someone of being too confident about a situation. So for instance, maybe your friend starts dating someone else, and your friend is very excited about this new relationship, and they're already thinking about their future marriage and their future children. You might want to say, hey, don't get ahead of yourself. You're not even sure if you guys are going to go out on another date or officially become boyfriend-girlfriend. So you're telling the person, don't assume that all these future events are going to happen. Or maybe, someone's really excited about a new job and they're like, I am going to be the boss of this company someday. You'll say, hey, don't get ahead of yourself. Have your first day and see if you like the situation first before you start planning out your entire future based off getting this job. So the phrase is don't get ahead of yourself. It's good advice to give to someone who's planning out way too far in advance, even though, a lot of things aren't certain or for sure yet. There are so many idioms in the English language that have to do with cards or card games or gambling even. This next phrase is if you play your cards right.
Could be. You play your cards right.
Now you're telling someone if they make wise decisions, then something will happen. Often something very positive for them. So if you play your cards right, you might get to go on vacation soon. If you want to tell someone, they should be nice to you because then you might do them a favor, you might say, if you play your cards right, I might buy you dinner. This means like, if you're nice to me, if you're polite, I'll pay for your dinner. So you're saying, you have to act good in order to have this thing happen. So if someone has a job and they're saying, I hope I can get a promotion soon, you might say to them, hey, if you play your cards right, you will for sure get a promotion or a better job by the end of the year.
This is a very, very common phrase. When you do something across the board, it means it affects everyone equally.
Get across the board.
Over time and across the board.
You could say, everyone in my house enjoys cheeseburgers across the board. That means everyone likes them so much. It's my favorite food in my family, for instance. Now, you could use this phrase in other ways as well. You could say, everyone in the company got a raise across the board. That means everyone working in the company, from people who were janitors to people who were CEOs, they all got a raise because the company is doing well. It just means in total. You could say it was not across the board. This means not everyone got a raise. Or you could say, not everybody likes cheeseburgers across the board in my house. So not everyone equally likes a thing. So you can use this phrase in a positive way or a negative way. This next phrase, the bottom line, it's very important in business, and it's also very important if you're having an argument with a native English speaker. If you're having an argument with someone over something, let's say you are not a very clean person and your roommate is a very clean person, and they're kind of mad at you because you're not picking up after yourself. They might say, the bottom line is you need to start helping around the house too. So this means this is their most important part. This is the reason that they're mad. If you've been arguing for a long time, someone might say, well, the bottom line is this is the main problem. In business, we say, what's the bottom line to mean how much money are we going to make off this deal? Maybe you are going to have some expenses in your company regarding a project, so they're going to take away some of the profit or some of the money that you would normally make. You can say it's going to affect our bottom line, which means the money or the profit that we're going to make. And usually we use this phrase in this way, in a negative way, like it's affecting the bottom line or the money that we make in a negative way. This next phrase is very crucial to know if you want to say that it is important to do something fast, or it's important to do something sooner rather than later. The phrase is time is of the essence. And I just love the way this phrase sounds when I say it. Time is of the essence. In a business email, if you want to politely tell someone that they need to do something quickly because you're relying on their response or you're relying on their work to finish the project, you could simply add in your email, please complete this as soon as possible. Time is of the essence. This just means time is very important. It's important to do this quickly. If people are trapped in a building and the building is on fire, time is of the essence for firefighters to get there and get people out before they are injured or before they have, too much smoke in their house. Time is of the essence. That means they have to do it quickly. If you have kids, you have maybe been frustrated with them before, and this phrase in English would be super useful. So if your kids are fighting, you might say, enough is enough. This needs to stop.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
We typically say enough is enough when we want a behavior to stop because we are so frustrated with it. You can be frustrated with something else too and use this phrase. For instance, in the winter here in the United States where I live, it snows so much. And at the end of the winter, if it snows and snows and snows, I just start saying, enough is enough. When is spring going to start? And when is the weather going to warm up? Because I am frustrated with the snow and I'm frustrated with the cold weather. Oftentimes, this next idiom, rapid fire, is used when you're asking someone questions really quickly. So you might say, I'm just going to rapid fire ask you some questions here. This means I'm just going to ask you what's going to come to my mind really quickly. You don't have to provide super detailed responses because these questions are going to be so quick. It's like you're throwing something at them really fast. If you want to say that someone is going to have no consequences for something that they did that was bad, you can say they got off scot-free.
Well, not scot-free.
We got away scot-free.
Now, this phrase scot-free we don't use really in any other instance in the English language unless we want to say that someone has no consequences for a crime or just a negative thing that they did. For instance, some people say that O.J. Simpson got off scot-free when he was tried for murder. They might say this if they believe that he was guilty and he was proven innocent in court and he never had to go to jail. So he got off scot-free. This next idiom is very useful if you want to tell someone that they should be happier, or if you want to describe someone as happy, you can say they are perky. If you want to tell them to be happy, you could say, oh, perk up, or I hope you perk up soon. So sometimes we use this when we're talking with a friend, but a lot of times too, we'll say that when an animal starts to act happy and excited, they are perking up. This means they're starting to be happy. They're getting perky, which is an adjective, and a really interesting adjective in the English language. When someone is sick and they are low energy, when they start to feel better, we often say that they are perking up, or they're getting more energy and they're improving in their mood. Riddle me this. If you don't have any money, then why are you out shopping right now? The phrase riddle me this is used when we are asking someone a question that we are confused about. This phrase is a little tongue-in-cheek, which just means it's playful. We're trying to give some attitude when we use this phrase. Or we can say riddle me this when we're asking someone a confusing question. You could say, riddle me this. What's black and white and red all over? A newspaper. So you're asking someone a riddle. And if you don't get that one, a newspaper is printed in black and white, but you read it with your eyes, which in the past tense is red. It's red all over. So it's supposed to be a challenging riddle or question. If you are asking someone a ton of questions really aggressively or intensely, they might ask you in English, why are you giving me the third degree? And in English, we consider third degree to be the most harsh of something. So for instance, if you get a third degree burn on your arm, it's a very bad burn from fire or something hot that damages your skin quite deeply. So if someone you live with, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your brother, maybe it's your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whoever is like, where are you going? Who are you going with? What time are you going to be home? And you are just irritated with all of these questions that they're asking you because they're being so aggressive and they're just asking for way too much information. If you know them pretty well, use this phrase. Say, why are you giving me the third degree? That means just stop asking me so many questions so aggressively. Have you ever hit a rough patch in life? When we use this phrase to hit a rough patch, it means just a period of time that's difficult. Often when people are dating or they're married and they're having a lot of arguments and they're just not enjoying their relationship very much, but then they get over it and they get along again, you could say that they had just hit a rough patch and things got better. Sometimes people in life will just have a rough patch in general. Maybe something happens, you lose your job, you get sick, or a loved one in your family is having issues, you could say it's just a rough patch in life. Just means a challenging part of life. You will hear native English speakers use this phrase, a rough patch, very frequently. There are so many idioms that are used to say that something is complete or finished. One of my favorite idioms is to say, that's all she wrote.
Got it, that's all she wrote. Cool.
That's all she wrote.
It's a very casual phrase, and it's a very playful phrase in the English language, and it just means that's it, it's all done. And it's often used when something ends abruptly or something runs out abruptly. Sometimes at night, I tell my children bedtime stories, and they'll say, one more story. And I will say, oh, that's all she wrote. It's all done. This is just a playful way to say, I am out of stories. It's time for bed. Have you ever blown off a responsibility? I hope not. And definitely don't blow off studying English. This phrase, to blow off something, means to ignore a responsibility or a job or task that you have to do. If your friend wants to get coffee with you or go out to dinner with you and they text you and you never respond, you're just blowing them off. This means you're being rude and you're ignoring them. So oftentimes in the English language, we use this phrase to mean ignoring someone or ignoring something, such as a responsibility. So you could say, I had to blow off doing laundry today. This means I had to ignore my laundry, even though it's a really important task that I have to do. I have to clean my clothes and fold them and put away. I just blew off the task. One English phrase that I really like to use in my everyday conversations is to change your tune. If you say someone changes their tune, you're not always talking about singing when you use this idiom. You use this idiom to say that someone has drastically changed their opinion or attitude towards something. If you have a friend and you say, are you going to our other friend's wedding? And they say, no, I hate weddings. I'm not going. And then the next day they say, well, I can't wait to go to their wedding. You could say, wow, you really changed your tune. This means you changed your attitude and your opinion of weddings really quickly. In English, sometimes we'll say, I'm going to summarize this, but sometimes in a casual English conversation, we'll say, I'm going to spare you the details. That means I'm going to tell you this really quick, like a summary. And oftentimes we use this phrase, I'm going to spare you the details, when we have a really long story that's not that important and we don't really want to tell you. Oftentimes, we are going to spare someone the gruesome details. If you say that you're going to spare someone the gruesome details, it means you're going to spare them or not tell them the gross parts of the story. We use this when we're talking about someone getting sick or someone getting hurt very badly. I'll spare you the gruesome details. That means I'll tell you the story quickly, but I'm not going to tell you the gross parts. Hit or miss. If you want to describe something that does not have consistent quality, you can say it's hit or miss. Some restaurants have hit or miss food. That means it's either a hit, which means it's very good. In the United States, when we want to say that something is very popular and great and awesome, we can say it's a hit. Or it's a miss, which we typically don't say things are a miss. But in this phrase, we just say it's a hit or a miss meaning very bad. So some pizza places will have the best pizza when you go. Depending on who's cooking it, it might be a miss, which means it will be very bad. If you go to a market or a grocery store to buy fruit, sometimes the fruit will have a really good quality. It will be delicious and fresh. And sometimes it will be old and starting to get rotten. So we could say the fruit is hit or miss at the grocery store. Sometimes instead of saying that it's not a big deal to do something, in the United States we'll say, well, it's not a crime. One example I can think of is if someone is indecisive. This means they can't decide on something. They'll say, I like chocolate and vanilla. I can't decide which piece of cake I want. You could say, well, it's not a crime to have both. This just means, there's nothing bad about having both. Like, you don't have to decide. So if you want to tell someone that something isn't bad or it's not a big deal, you can say, well, it's not a crime. And this is just a playful way to tell them that they can do something that they might think is bad, but you're saying it's okay. A really useful phrase in English is to say, read between the lines.
Read between the lines, Theo.
Yeah, but read between the lines.
This phrase means that even though someone is doing something or saying something, you can just kind of tell from the context or the subliminal things that they're saying that they mean something else, or they're kind of revealing a secret if you read between the lines. If you have a friend and they say, "Well, I just want to go window shopping today. I don't want to spend any money, I don't actually need anything." You might read between the lines if you know them pretty well and just the context of the situation, and you say, "I think they maybe just don't have a lot of money right now. Maybe they're a bit poor." Now, of course, you might want to say this to your friend's face, but if you're reading between the lines, it means that you're able to understand something that the person did not directly say.
To go hand in hand.
Hand in hand, hand in shoulder.
Now, when people walk together, we say they're walking hand in hand if they are holding hands. In our everyday English conversations, we want to say that two things go together very nicely. We say they go hand in hand. For instance, practicing English every day and speaking like a native English speaker go hand in hand, because the more you practice, the better that you will sound. Sometimes we don't just use this with verbs. If you've had too much of a food, let's say you've had a ton of candy, you've been eating candy all day, and someone says, "Hey, do you want some of these M&Ms or do you want some of these Skittles?" You can say, "No, I am candied out for the day." That means you can't eat any more candy. So if you are confused at why an English speaker is saying, a noun with the ed suffix, or you hear someone say, "I'm hiked out," or "I'm walked out," or "I'm run out," and you're like, that doesn't sound right, it's because we're speaking in this way, and it's like an idiom the way we use it. It just means you're exhausted, you don't want to do the action or have that thing anymore. Normally, when we use the verb find or to find, we're talking about looking for someone that is lost or looking for something that is lost. Now, sometimes the way that we speak in English, we use this verb to find in a totally different way. So if you think that someone is funny, you can say, "I find them funny." This means, you think that they're funny, they are funny to you. Or you could say, "I've never really found them funny." This means they don't seem funny to you. So we use to find with an adjective to describe the way that we perceive someone or something. If you are someone who has never really enjoyed Taylor Swift's music, you could say, "I don't really find her talented." This means she's not talented to you in your opinion. Or a lot of times if we're in a situation, we say, "Oh, I really am finding this to be enjoyable." Or you could say, "I don't find this to be enjoyable." This means you don't like it. So we can say, we're finding someone a certain quality or adjective, or we can say we find this thing a certain adjective like funny, or we find this ugly, we find this pretty, we find this to be boring, things like that. So this verb to find in this phrase is super, super useful in English. When I was in college, when I was a college student, I would always say, "I cannot wait for the day that I graduate."
I cannot wait. Well, as quick as you possibly can. Quicker, please.
So this phrase, "to wait for the day," or "you cannot wait for the day," it just means you're extremely, extremely excited for something to happen and you're anticipating it. Sometimes when someone is judging you and they're judging you in a negative way, you might say, "I cannot wait for the day when this thing that you're judging me for happens to you." For instance, maybe you have a baby and they're crying and someone's looking at you like, "Oh, why is your baby crying in public?" In the United States, a lot of people have a huge problem with babies crying in public, even though, they're just babies. But you might say, "Oh, I cannot wait for the day when you have kids and they are crying in public." This just means, I can't wait for this to happen to you because, you won't be judging the situation as harshly. So we say this, when we're wanting something to happen to someone so that they don't judge the situation. And we also say, I can't wait for the day when we're excited about something. Maybe you'll say, I cannot wait for the day that we go on vacation. It just means you're very excited and you're anticipating your vacation. Have you ever heard of an Easter egg?
And if you do happen to find that Easter egg, there's a bonus.
Of course, in the United States, Easter is a holiday that some people celebrate religiously, and there's also a non-religious aspect to Easter where we tell children the story of an Easter bunny coming and bringing eggs with little prizes and candies inside and getting an Easter basket with some gifts inside as well. It's kind of a strange tradition, but sometimes we use that term Easter egg to mean that there are things inside of a movie or a video game that reference something else outside of the movie, the television show, or the video game. When I think of Easter eggs in this context, I think of the Disney and Pixar movies because a lot of times those movies will have little items in the background of the movie that reference the other movies. For instance, in Finding Nemo, there are a ton of Easter eggs that reference other Pixar movies. If you've seen The Incredibles, there is a newspaper with Mr. Incredible on the front that a kid is reading inside the dentist's office in Finding Nemo. If you haven't seen these movies, I recommend it because even though they're children's movies, they are so entertaining. And if you've watched them before, you could watch them again and learn some English while reading the captions or the subtitles. So an Easter egg is just something that, the dialogue of a movie or a television show, they're not talking about it, but it's just something in the background that references something else. It's a really interesting vocabulary term. Sometimes in English, we say things twice in slang to kind of emphasize something. And this next idiom that I'm going to teach you is another example of that. When you want to ask someone if they are being serious because what they said is either so shocking and surprising or you don't really believe it, instead of just saying, are you serious? You might say, are you for real? And sometimes as slang, we'll say, for real, for real?
Is this for real? Like for real, for real?
So we'll just repeat the phrase twice. For real, for real? For real. This just means like, seriously, this is actually what happened. For real, for real. Another instance in English where we kind of use this repeating is when you like someone in a romantic way. You might say, I like them. This means like you really like them in a romantic way, not just as a friend. I like them as a friend. No, I like them. So this repeating thing is really interesting in English. I know a lot of other languages use this as well. Officially in English, it's just slang though. For real, for real? Have you ever been in a situation where you are so busy with so many different things going on in your life? Maybe you have a family to take care of, you have a job, you have a house, you have family members that need taking care of, older family members, and you just have so many things going on. You just think to yourself that you have to change something or the situation just isn't going to be good. People are going to suffer. In English, we have a phrase for this exact situation. We say, something has got to give.
Because if you do that to God's creatures long enough, something's got to give.
This means there has to be a compromise somewhere. You have to, stop doing something for someone, or you're not going to be able to take care of all your responsibilities. Sometimes when we're frustrated with someone, we'd say, something's gotta give, or I'm just gonna get so angry and upset that I'm not going to be able to continue on working with you or having this relationship, or whatever it might be. A lot of times people have a lot of financial obligations and they get themselves into debt. They owe a lot of people money and they have to stop spending money somewhere. Something's got to give, or, all these people are going to be collecting their debt and you're going to have no money to try to pay them. So when we say something's got to give in English, it just means that we have to make a compromise somewhere. We have to stop doing something, or the situation cannot continue on and be a good situation. Sometimes when something very tragic or sad happens to you, or you have a fear of something, you have to keep going in life and you have to, change the way you feel or stop being so sad. In English, we say that we are over something when we get past these types of feelings.
I don't know if anyone could ever totally get over something like that.
For instance, if someone dies or you lose a pet, maybe your pet dog dies, and you feel sad for a very long time and you feel like you can't even see other dogs because it just makes you so sad. Finally, you stop having these feelings. And in English, we say we're over it. We are over our dog's death. Or maybe you're very, very scared of giving a speech in front of other people and you practice and practice and practice until finally you don't feel scared anymore. You can say, I am over my fear. So to be over with something, we usually say we're over a certain feeling, a negative feeling, and we can move past it and start doing what we wanted to do or stop feeling a bad feeling.
It's a scam.
I don't even want to change a scam.
So what's the scam, Betty? You take this whole thing's a scam.
I hope that you've never been scammed, but it happens so frequently. And in English, when something is fake or someone tries to kind of steal something from you by being deceptive, we call that a scam. So someone might lie to you and say, hey, this is an actual iPhone. It's the best iPhone ever. Just, give me $100 and I'll sell this iPhone to you. Well, it turns out that it's either not a real iPhone or they just take your money and don't give you anything. We call this a scam. And if we want to say that a person is, kind of a liar and they're likely to scam you, or sometimes we say rip you off, which means basically the same thing as a scam. They try to sell you something or take your money somehow. We say that they are a scammer. A lot of times on the telephone, people call you and, say like, your computer is being taken over. If you don't give us $100, your computer is going to have all these viruses. That is usually a scam. It's actually always a scam. No one will ever call you and ask you to give them money if it's not a scam. If you want to tell someone that they don't need to worry about something, you can say, there's no need to worry.
There's no need to worry.
No need to worry.
No need to worry.
If you want to tell someone that there's no reason to have to hurry up or go fast or quickly, you could say, there's no need to rush. This phrase, there's no need to, and then you insert the verb. It's a really useful phrase in English. We use this all the time when we want to reassure someone that they don't have to do something. It's not required of them. If you want to tell someone at work that they don't have to worry about doing something, they can just relax or they can work on something else because you've already done the project or the task. You can say, there's no need to worry about the report. I've already submitted. Or if you want to tell someone, I'm coming to pick you up, but we are not in a hurry. We have plenty of time. You can say, there's no need to rush. We have plenty of time. So this phrase, there's no need to, it's incredibly popular in English. Make sure you add it to your English vocabulary. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Oftentimes in English, when people feel like, they don't have to work any harder because they can't change the situation or they can't change the outcome, or they say, oh, sorry, it's like this. People say, well, it is what it is. This is just a very common way to say, let's just accept this situation because we can't really change anything about it. So maybe it's raining outside and you and your friends were going to enjoy the day and have a picnic. You can say, it is what it is. At least we can spend some time together inside. So that means we can't change the weather. It is what it is, but we can still do this fun thing. So oftentimes we follow it is what it is with a positive aspect, or sometimes we call it a silver lining of the situation. A silver lining is just a positive thing that has to do with a negative situation. And if you want to know more color idioms like that one, silver lining, make sure to check out my last idiom video that is all about color idioms. A lot of my English learners have found this video super useful as well. But let's keep going with these 25 phrases that you absolutely need to know too. To be frazzled.
You know what? I'm feeling a little less frazzled than I thought.
Okay, so in English, this is an awesome idiom because it combines a lot of different feelings. It combines being stressed, overwhelmed, tired. Instead of just saying all of those things, we can say, I'm sorry, I'm just so frazzled. And this kind of reminds me of frizz. If you've ever heard the word frizz in English, it describes when someone's hair is all puffed up and messy, like frizzy. Instead of saying frizzy to describe the feeling of just being like messy, overwhelmed, tired, say, oh, I'm frazzled. So you don't want to be frazzled. It's usually a negative feeling if you say you're frazzled. When my kids are running around screaming, they have nothing to do, I feel really frazzled. I'm like, everyone sit down. Let's play a game. Let's do something. I just try to organize the situation that's going on. If you're in the workplace and you have a meeting and then just a 5-minute break and then another meeting and then another meeting, you might start to feel frazzled because you've had no time to eat a meal or get organized or figure out, what's on the schedule for the day. You might just feel overwhelmed and stressed or frazzled. Have you heard this next idiom? It's a really, really interesting one. To spill one's guts.
Now this American idiom, spill one's guts.
So if you want to say, I'm going to spill my guts to you, it has nothing to do with the inside of your body. It's more of revealing some truth or revealing how you actually feel about a situation. So oftentimes when people go to therapy, it just feels good to spill their guts to their therapist. And that just means to tell them all of, how they feel about everything, maybe some things that they would normally keep a secret. It just feels good to spill your guts and tell someone exactly how you feel about things that you normally wouldn't say. Or if you want to tell someone, tell me exactly how you feel, you say, well, spill your guts. Let's hear it. So this phrase, it just means reveal how you actually feel or kind of reveal your secrets and your secret feelings. To show up uninvited.
Yeah, they always show up uninvited.
People show up uninvited for dinner.
Have you ever had a guest show up at a party or a meeting and no one really wanted them there? They showed up uninviting. They showed up uninvited. So this phrase is very useful when you have a guest that you literally didn't invite. You didn't want them there. You can say, well, they showed up uninvited. A lot of times in English, instead of saying that we're confused, we'll use this next idiom. We'll say that we have brain fog.
Princeton's like a fog.
Brain fog describes that feeling when you just can't really focus on anything. You can't really think of the right answer to something. You're just all confused and you're not really focused on things. If I stay up way too late and I don't get enough sleep, the next day I will have brain fog. I will be making mistakes all of the time. I'll just be confused and I can't really think very well if I stay up too late because I have brain fog. So brain fog isn't an actual medical condition, but it's just an idiom that we use to describe feeling confused or kind of tired and you just can't think very clearly. On the other hand, if you're feeling very tense, very nervous, and very anxious, sometimes we say that we feel on edge.
I'm completely on edge right now.
So if you have a big presentation coming up and you're feeling really nervous and, somebody asks you, are you nervous for your presentation tomorrow? And you get kind of angry at them for even asking about it or bringing the topic up. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm on edge because I am nervous about my presentation. Or if someone is acting really, angry, they're, giving you rude responses and you think that they're just stressed out, you can say, it's okay, she's just on edge or he's just on edge. That's why he's acting so angry and rude. To ramble, or often we say in English, to ramble on.
You're just going to ramble on.
When someone is just talking and talking and talking and talking, and they're not really making a lot of sense, or they're just talking about things that you don't really care about, you can describe that as someone rambling, or you could say they're rambling on. Or if you are talking to someone and you don't want to talk too much, you'll say, I don't want to ramble right now. This means you don't want to just keep talking for no reason. Sometimes when people are nervous, they tend to ramble on or just keep talking, even though they don't have many important things to say. They're just talking because they feel nervous. They're rambling. Or maybe you've known someone that it seems like they just like to talk. Maybe they're kind of lonely. You can call them a rambler. Yeah, they kind of ramble, so I don't want to talk to them for too long. Because if people ramble, oftentimes we're saying that the things that they're talking about aren't very important. They're just talking to have a conversation and to keep you around. The next phrase in English is a little bit tricky for my students to understand. Sometimes in English we say they aren't the type.
Veronica, you are not the type.
How would you know?
So we're saying they don't have this type of characteristic or this personality. So if you know someone that's very shy, maybe they like to stay in and play video games, they don't really like to go to parties, you can say they're not really the type to go out on Friday nights. This means, that's not their personality because they are quite the opposite, actually. Or if you're surprised by someone's behavior because they don't typically have the personality or the characteristics to be doing that sort of thing, you can say, I'm surprised you're at the concert right now. You're not the type to enjoy crowds. This can be, a way we use the phrase. Or if we're really surprised and we want to doubt that someone did something, we could say, well, they're not usually the type to lie. This means they are very honest, and I would be surprised if they lied. This next phrase is used when you strongly dislike something, or you don't want to wear something, or you don't want to be in a place. You can say, I wouldn't be caught dead doing the thing.
I wouldn't be caught dead with someone stupid enough to drive that car.
Or I wouldn't be caught dead wearing a dress, or I wouldn't be caught dead going to a concert. This just means that whatever action or place you're talking about, you would not do it. It's not like you at all, and you're actually probably pretty against it. So maybe you are super, super healthy and you believe that eating all sugar is very bad. You could say, I wouldn't be caught dead eating a piece of cake. So this is a very dramatic expression that we like to use in English, but we use it a lot. I wouldn't be caught dead doing that. Maybe you wouldn't be caught dead doing it because you are embarrassed by whatever thing or whatever place it is. When you want to say that everyone is acting normal, even though there's kind of a weird circumstance or event going on, you can say, well, things are business as usual today.
Yeah, sure. Business as usual, huh?
Maybe there's a holiday, but you are still expected to work. Your boss might say, I know that it is Valentine's Day, President's Day coming up, which are two really small holidays in the United States. Not everybody gets those days off of work. Your boss might say, I know it's a holiday, but it's business as usual today. Or sometimes in the United States, when we get big snowstorms, we sometimes cancel school, but sometimes it's just business as usual. The teacher might say, I know it's snowing outside, but it's business as usual. Let's get back to our studying. If you've ever met someone who won't take responsibility for a mistake, or they won't take responsibility for a job they're supposed to do, and they just, make you do it instead, in English, we have a very specific way of saying this. We say, they're going to turn it around on you.
You try to turn it around on me.
If you meet someone who, makes a big mistake and they say, oh, it's all your fault, they're turning it around on you. Or oftentimes, if we're in an argument with someone, they, turn everything in the situation back onto you. So they say, oh, you're actually a bad friend, or you did this mistake. It's not me. So turning something around on someone else, we use this phrase just to say like they're shifting blame, or they're shifting a negative situation that should be about one person to the other person. So don't turn the argument around on me. That's just an example of how we might use this phrase when we're having an argument and we don't want someone to start saying negative things to us. The plot has thickened.
But the plot thickens.
This next idiom I'm hearing more and more in everyday conversations with my friends right now. And we use this phrase to mean that, things have just gotten interesting. Maybe there's some drama or there's some detail that makes a situation kind of mysterious or more interesting. You definitely can use this phrase, the plot has thickened, if you're reading a book or if you're watching a movie and something really interesting or mysterious happens. We talk about the plot as being the story or the problem in a movie or in a book. So if we're saying that the story or the plot has thickened, we mean it's gotten more interesting. And in our everyday life, if, you're trying to figure out who stole something, and you're pretty sure it's one person, but then you find some evidence or some new detail that suggests it's a different person. So now nobody knows who stole the thing that you're looking for. You can say, well, the plot has thickened. We don't know who it was. This just means it has become more interesting or more mysterious. Speaking of mysteries, this next idiom would be very useful as well. We are talking about mysteries or problem. So sometimes in English, we describe solving a problem as putting the pieces together.
You'll put the pieces together for her.
Or you can say putting the puzzle pieces together. Especially if you're talking about solving a crime or a mystery, you're taking different pieces of evidence and putting them together, putting the pieces together. So oftentimes when there's a car accident, they will ask, the driver of one car what happened, the driver of the other car what happened. They'll look at the physical evidence of each car and they'll put the pieces together to decide whose fault it was that there was a car crash or a car accident. Or sometimes you might meet someone new and they're describing some things about their life and you're like, it sounds like maybe they were married before and they got divorced. But they didn't tell you directly this. So you just kind of are guessing based on them saying, oh, well, my ex-husband, da 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 da. You say, I put the pieces together and I figured out, they're not married anymore. They got divorced. This just means you're kind of solving something without someone directly telling you the detail or the thing about themselves. Have you ever met someone in life that just really rolls with the punches?
Roll with the punches. Tomorrow's another day.
This next idiom means that someone is very flexible and they can react to a lot of different setbacks or surprises in life. If you're at work and someone says, we're having all these problems with this technology, we can't get it to work, we can't get this project done, you can say, it's okay, we'll just roll with the punches and we'll do our best to get everything done, even though there's some problems. So this is suggesting, you're very laid back, you're very flexible, and you're not going to be angered or worried when there are some problems when you're trying to get something done. So when you say that someone just rolls with the punches, this is typically describing them very positively, like they can get stuff done even if there's problems or setbacks. This next phrase, be very careful with, because if you use it in the wrong context, it could potentially be pretty offensive. So the phrase is shut up or put up.
Shut up, Alan.
So the phrase shut up itself is quite offensive in English. If you tell someone to shut up, it's very, very rude. It's considered rude. And if you're trying to be harsh and rude, of course, use this phrase. And make sure that, you know the person pretty well. You know they won't react to it too harshly if you use it. The phrase shut up or put up, it is telling someone to stop criticizing something or complaining about something unless they are going to take action to fix the thing or make something better. So shut or put up. So you might encounter someone that is complaining about how you're cleaning. And you might say, well, shut up or put up. Clean it yourself or stop complaining. A really common idiom that's used in English to say, like, why am I confused? What information did I not hear is, what am I missing here?
What am I missing here?
I was listening to a podcast the other day and the speaker said, everyone seemed so happy and I was so miserable. I was thinking, what am I missing here? So this is just saying, like, what don't I understand? Why am I missing something that makes everyone else happy in the same situation? Or if you read something and you can't figure out why the person thought, this plan would work, you could say, I've read your plan several times and I just don't think it will work. What am I missing here? So this is like, am I missing some sort of information or detail that will make this plan make sense? And sometimes when you ask this question to someone, it seems really obvious. Oh, you're missing this. You didn't realize that, we have to do it this way or something. So this question can really help clarify a situation in English. Have you ever heard someone say in English that they got a wake-up call?
I'm not a shrink, Bob. I'm a wake-up call.
So the literal meaning of this is someone calls your phone in order to make sure you wake up, just like an alarm clock. So you can request this when you're staying at a hotel. But oftentimes in English, we also use this as an idiom to mean that we had something in life that made us realize our priorities. So, for instance, maybe you got laid off or fired from your job. And you could say, well, getting laid off from my job actually turned out to be a wake up call because I realized I needed to spend more time with my family and less time on work. Or oftentimes when people have poor health and they realize, life is pretty terrible when you don't have good health, it's a wake up call to them and they start living a more healthy lifestyle. In English, instead of saying we are going to keep a secret, oftentimes we say we are going to keep something to ourselves.
You keep to yourself.
Why are you arresting him?
So this means we're not going to tell everyone the information. It's going to be a secret. Or if you want to tell someone, don't tell everyone this, keep it very quiet. You can say keep it to yourself. If you are engaged to be married, or if you're pregnant, you're going to have a baby, oftentimes you will tell someone the exciting news and you'll say, keep it to yourself because we haven't told everyone yet. So you want to have the chance to tell everyone personally your exciting news or secret. Or if you trust someone, you can say, I trust that they will keep it to themselves. A lot of times in English, when you are going to have a meeting with someone, in order to talk about some details of something or to plan something out, you can say, we are going to have a meeting to talk specifics.
Can't really talk specifics, but.
So this phrase just means like, we're not just going to talk generally, we're actually going to plan out every detail, every specific detail of the plan or the trip or whatever it might be. If you want to say that someone has agreed to a deal, but you haven't, worked out every single detail, you can say, well, they agreed, but we haven't talked specifics yet. So this phrase is very useful in English when you have only talked about something generally and not specifically yet. You could say, we'll talk specifics later. Or you could ask someone, do you want to get dinner with me? And they'll say, sure. And you'll say, well, okay, we'll talk specifics later. That means we'll plan out the details of where we're eating and when we're eating and who's driving to the restaurant later. Being polite while you're speaking English is very important, just like in any other language or culture. And if you want to tell someone that they need to be careful about the way that they're speaking, either to another person or to yourself, you can say, hey, watch your tone.
Hey, what's your tone, Klaus?
This means don't speak so rudely. So instead of saying don't be rude, we say watch your tone. That means don't speak to me rudely. Oftentimes, if you're watching a movie or a TV show, the mom will say to the children, watch your tone. That means, don't give me attitude or don't be rude to me. Be very respectful and polite. Have you ever fallen head over heels in love with someone?
That I'll fall head over heels for Joe?
So this idiom, head over heels, it means that someone is very in love or very infatuated with someone. So we often use this phrase, head over heels in love. We use those two phrases together. Or sometimes we just say, I'm head over heels for them. That means you're very, very infatuated or pretty in love with someone. Now, we typically don't use this phrase, head over heels, when two people have been happily married for a long time. We use this phrase when people have just met and they instantly fall in love. So at the very beginning of a relationship is when we say two people are head over heels for one another. A must-know phrase in English is to not miss a beat.
Didn't miss a beat.
Or we often say the person didn't miss a beat. So I think of this idiom as coming from the idea that when someone plays music, if they play it perfectly, they don't miss any beats on the measure of music that they're playing. In life, when there's something surprising or kind of confusing, but it doesn't make you make a mistake, you can say, well, that didn't make me miss a beat. Or if someone, reacted to a situation really well and, you wouldn't have known that there was any problem going on, you could say they did not miss a beat. For instance, maybe someone at your work quits, but everyone still is getting all the work done and nobody's missing any deadlines. You could say we did not miss a beat, even though Sally quit last week.